Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to the second and final week of CNAS's annual National Security Conference. I'm Richard Fontaine, Chief Executive Officer of CNAS, and today's main event, so to speak, is the pitch, our second annual event aimed at drawing out new and emerging voices in national security and elevating them for the community. This competition of new ideas is a little bit like Nat meets Shark Tank. Contestants for today's session, each of whom has been selected from a large pool of applicants by the pitch team, is going to compete against each other in 3 separate heats to determine who has the most innovative ideas to meet new national security challenges. The contestants have been divided into 3 categories based on their pitches. We have Sharpening America's Innovation Toolkit, Reimagining America's Alliances and Partnerships, and Strengthening America's National Security Institutions. As we get started, I'd like to thank the Common Mission Project for their sponsorship of the pitch again this year, and also thank our esteemed panel of judges for joining us once again. The judges aren't the only ones who will weigh in on the ideas that you all will hear. Those of you tuning in, the audience, you'll have your say when we open voting later for a People's Choice Award. So stay tuned and active in the conversation throughout the competition. And now with that, let me turn it over to our host, Kate Kuzminski, Senior Fellow and Director of our Military Veterans and Society Program. And she is going to kick things off in earnest for the pitch. So Kate, over to you.
Thanks, Richard. Good morning and welcome to the second annual convening of The Pitch, a competition of ideas. I'm Kate Kuzminski, Senior Fellow and Director of the Military Veterans and Society Program here at CNAS, and I'll be your host for today. Co-hosting with me is Shai Corman, our Director of Communications here at CNAS. Welcome, Shai.
Hey, Kate. I am thrilled to be here. How are you doing today as we begin this exciting program?
I'm excited to hear from our panelists, our competitors, and from our judges. So a bit about today's event. The Pitch is the center's premier event to elevate emerging and diverse voices in national security. This year's event is sponsored by the Common Mission Project, and we thank them for investing in the next generation of national security leaders. Today, you will hear pitches from 12 contestants who are divided into 3 different heats. Heat 1 is entitled Sharpening America's Innovation Toolkit. Contestants in this heat will be answering the question, what new ideas in U.S. national technology policy, economic statecraft, or military strategy can address growing national security challenges for the United States and strengthen the security and prosperity of the American people? Heat 2 is entitled Reimagining America's Alliances and Partnerships. Contestants in this second heat will answer the question, what new approach could the United States pursue in key bilateral relationships, multilateral organizations, or international institutions to more effectively achieve vital U.S. interests and competitiveness? And Heat 3 is entitled Strengthening America's National Security Institutions. Contestants in this heat will answer the question, what specific reform to critical U.S. national security institutions, including structures, processes, and human capital, can improve their effectiveness and public confidence in the face of new challenges? Now that we've heard all the categories, why don't we open it up for an audience question? Which heat are you looking forward to the most? You'll have 1 minute here to answer the poll question. Shai, how about you? Now that you've heard the categories, which category or categories are you most looking forward to?
So first of all, I'm so excited about the voting part of this. And if anyone needs instructions before I maybe sway your vote a little bit, you'll see on the cnas.org/live website or conference.cnas.org, there's a chat box right below the video. And all you have to do is enter your name because we don't want anonymous people chatting. We want to keep it friendly. And right below that, a vote button will appear in the bottom right. And click that vote button and you'll be able to vote in today's poll. I just voted myself. And I would say the heat I am most excited for is the one about national security institutions. And that is because I was a civil servant for 12 years at the State Department, and I'm really interested in all of the intricate things that can be done to improve and reform and make more efficient our national security institutions so they can match the incredible dedication of all the people working there. So today I'm very interested in national security institutions, but to be honest, I voted for all of them because who isn't excited for this whole competition? How about you? Which one are you most excited for?
Again, not to sway the audience, but I'm a bit of a process nerd, so I'm really looking forward to the conversations on institutions, and of course to all of the panelists that are competing today. And speaking of process, a little bit about the process of how we'll proceed. So for each heat, each contestant will have 2 minutes to present their pitch. After all the contestants have presented their pitches, our expert judges will each ask each contestant one question about their pitch, and the contestant will have 1 minute to answer. At the end of the heat, the judges will rank the contestants. Contestants will be judged on 4 criteria areas: ingenuity and creativity of idea, practicality of the idea, academic rigor, and clarity, persuasiveness, and delivery. Rankings will not be announced until after all of the heats are completed. After the final heat, our VIP judges will go to a private virtual room where they will vote for the best in show out of the 3 heat winners. While the VIP judges are doing that, you will be asked to vote for your favorite in a People's Choice poll. The poll will open approximately at 1:15 p.m. after the 3rd heat. In order to participate in the People's Choice poll and all others throughout the program, please either go to cnas.com/live or conference.cnas.org and join the chat. You can also engage with us on Twitter using the hashtag CNAS2021. Winners of each heat will be featured on the CNAS website, will contribute to a CNAS published commentary featuring their pitch, and will win a cash prize. The winner of Best in Show will also be able to participate in the Sean Brimley Next Generation National Security Leaders dinner event of their choice. Now to introduce our judges. At the end of the show, we'll have our VIP judges joining us. Our 2 VIP judges are Michelle Flournoy and Mike Zach. Michelle is the co-founder and chair of the board of directors here at CNAS, and Mike Zach is a member of our board of directors. Michelle and Mike will be joining us later in the program to announce our heat winners and provide feedback on their pitches. Then they will announce the best in show and the overall winner of the day. Stay tuned to see them later in our program. But first, let's welcome our expert judges. First, we have CNAS Robert M. Gates Senior Fellow, Carrie Cordero. Carrie, welcome. Whoop, I think you're on mute.
Of course, somebody had to do it, right? Nice to be with you, Kate.
So, Carrie, you participated as a judge in last year's event as well. What were some of the aspects to a successful pitch in last year's event?
I think one of the most important things that we saw last year in the successful pitches were those that really were creative, that brought a new and a fresh take on whatever was the particular question that they were trying to answer. But in the national security and foreign policy community, where it tends to be people who, move around from different places in Washington and sometimes can be a little bit susceptible to groupthink, those presentations that presented something that were really just a whole new way of looking at a particular idea or question, I think were the most compelling.
And I think we'll see some of that today as well. Thanks. Next on to our panelist, Jimmy Anderson. Jimmy, you brief senior leaders every day. Tell us a bit about what makes a successful pitch, particularly with respect to the time constraints that are placed on senior leaders.
Thank you, Kate, for having me, and so glad to join this panel. What makes a pitch great is to be able to be concise, but also tell folks why it matters. You only have a little bit of time. Be concise, why it matters, and then also why is your perspective more unique than the other. Mm-hmm. Those are the 3 things that I would say, Kate. Thank you.
That's great. Next, we have CNAS Associate Fellow in our Middle East Security Program and the 2020 recipient of the First Lieutenant Andrew Vasevich Award. Kaylee, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here.
Kaylee, it seems that we see you on TV all the time, and you do an excellent job of synthesizing the complex dynamics of Middle East security. What are some of the secrets of your success?
I think what's kind of most applicable for our competitors today is to, even with the tight time constraint, provide just a little bit of context. Building off of what Jimmy said, we want to know the why. So defining the problem clearly before you give your solution will help us understand how that solution really will fix that problem.
And finally with us, we have Tina Huang, a policy program manager at the Stanford Institute for Human-Centered Artificial Intelligence, and more importantly for today's purposes, the winner of the 2020 Pitches People's Choice Award. Tina, welcome aboard. It's great to have you back.
Thank you. It's great to be back.
So what elements or characteristics of your pitch do you think resonated most with the audience last year?
Sure. So I started off with a story about the Wright brothers, which is a classic story of American innovation, because I wanted to inspire. If two brothers who owned a bike shop could build an airborne plane in the early 1900s, imagine what we could do for innovation if we had a national cloud today.
That's great. So Shai, you've mentioned the importance of audience engagement today. Can you give us a bit more information on how the audience can be involved?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're so excited. We're already seeing audience engagement, by the way. There are tons of people already watching live, and we had our first message in here from Dan. He voted on the poll, but he also tried to sway the audience as well, which is, I think everyone should be thinking about the chat as a fun way to make the case for which ideas you like the most. And Dan said that he voted for strengthening national security institutions, by the way. So it'll be really interesting to see if that moved the crowd at all. And again, how you can do this is going to conference.cnas.org or cnas.org/live. And right below the video feed, you'll see a chat box. And in that chat box, feel free to jump in and share your ideas and your reactions or questions for our contestants. And that's also where you're going to be able to vote, because a little vote button will appear when voting begins, when voting opens. So keep that in mind throughout the day. The other way we'd love to see people participate is on social media. So use the hashtag CNAS 2021. Sorry, that was last year's conference. Still people are tweeting about it. They're so excited. But CNAS 2021. And there you can join the conversation. Again, add your comments, add your thoughts, add your questions. All of our contestants are going to be active on social media all day today. So this is a great opportunity to cheer them on, to get a little more information about their ideas. And those are, I think, all the ways we can do it. I'm very curious to see where people came down on this poll today. Are we ready for that?
I think so. So again, we opened with an audience poll about which heat people are looking forward to the most. But before we get to the audience results, let's see what our judges are looking forward to. Carrie, what are you looking forward to the most?
So like you and Shai, Kate, I am very interested in the institutions. And so that'll be Heat 3 a little bit later on, what people will be proposing as far as strengthening our national security institutions. But I have to say that this week in particular, I am really looking forward to Heat 2, which is the discussion of reimagining our alliances, particularly with President Biden's trip that he's on now, meeting with our EU and NATO partners. The discussion of alliances and partnerships is going to be particularly relevant to all of the emerging things that we're seeing going on the world stage this week.
Kaylee, how about you?
I really feel like I thought I was supposed to be asking the hard questions today, Kate. But if I can't say all of them, if I had to choose, I guess it's a tie probably between Heat 1 and Heat 2 for me today. Carrie outlined why Heat 2 is so important. And as someone who works on the Middle East, as we're really pivoting towards the Indo-Pacific, I'm just curious to hear what these emerging leaders, think about who we should be working with, how and on what subject matter. But Heat 1 is just so outside of my lane. I'm sure I'm just going to be blown away by the really creative ideas about, technology innovation and what the U.S. could be doing to meet the new challenges it's facing.
Jimmy, how about you?
Again, just as Kaylee said, this is tough. So I would probably lean towards the first heat, America's Innovation Toolkit, because, as a Next Gen Fellow last year, we're looking at those rising national security leaders that have something creative and this unique perspective that's being brought to the table. So I can't wait to see what folks offer in that heat. Thank you.
And Tina, what are you looking forward to the most?
I mean, as a tech policy nerd, I have to go with Heat 1. Last year, I pitched a national cloud, and last Friday, OSTP stood up a task force to investigate the feasibility of such a cloud. So I'm not saying that I caused that, but I do think that innovation is definitely on the rise. We're always thinking about it, and policymakers are paying attention to see what new ideas are out there.
We'll be checking next year to see which of the pitch ideas end up in whatever the next round of policy innovations are. So,
right.
It's not just about who wins today.
That's right. So let's take a look at what the audience had to say. All right. So it looks like out in the lead is the national security institutions. And I don't know, maybe we've swayed the audience here. Shai, is that what you were expecting?
I was expecting a big all of them. That's what I voted for. But, I love to hear that people are interested in, I'm sure everyone's interested in all of them, but I love to hear that people are interested in how our institutions can stay strong. I think their importance is so critical to our democracy and how we implement every element of our national security. So I'm thrilled, but I'm a little surprised more people didn't say all of them. But I also love that people chose, right? They didn't take the easy way out like I did.
I think that's right. And I think that we are, as part of investing in the next generation, we're raising a series of process wonks as well. And that makes my heart feel good.
I just want to also give a shout out to the folks in the comments. We've got some great comments that keep going, so I'm going to keep mentioning them. If I hope I have the pronunciations right, and if I don't, I apologize. But Colonel Jarvis says, when I say NatSec, you say Girl Squad. So we've got the NatSec Girl Squad crew. We know them well. They're representing in the chat. Love seeing that. John Dale Grover also shouted out to NatSec Girl Squad. John, I believe, is one of our contestants for later. And Katie asks about the contestants' thoughts on improving alliances. So there's some enthusiasm there for Heat number 2. Thank you, everybody who's in the comments and on Twitter. Keep them coming. We will read them out as we can throughout the day.
That's right. And back to Tina's earlier comment, too, I think it's really heartening to see that the results of last year's competitors on the pitch and the way that their ideas are playing out in policy moving forward. What are some of the ideas that our fellow judges are looking forward to seeing out there in the world in broad strokes? What do you hope that the next generation can do to impact the way that policy moves forward?
Anyone can jump in. Kaylee looks like she, and so this, you don't worry, this is not a preview of the of the contestants. This is just in general. If you were throwing a new idea out there, Tina already influenced the cloud. So if Tina already influenced the cloud policy, this is going to Jimmy, Kaylee, or Carrie, whoever wants to jump in first. Where do you see like some of the most exciting innovation coming in coming years?
I work on the Middle East. I'm on my way out. No one cares anymore. I'm not the one to look to for innovation. I'm trying to talk about how the U.S. can do less. But I think, and this is more thematic. So yeah, I'm taking the easy way out, and I bet we'll see this a lot. But I'm really just excited about like new ways of conceptualizing how different parts of the U.S. government can work together. I think that's going to be a theme. So not just, what the actual policy idea is, but how you operationalize that, how you implement that, how you think about, providing resources and funding, all of that process, not just focus on national security institutions, but really working it through all of these pitches today. I know as someone who's kind of earlier in their career, that's what I'm thinking about, what the, coming decades hopefully will be like and how we'll all continue to work together.
Carrie.
Sure. So I think this is really just such an amazing time to be somebody who is in the policy or the practitioner space in national security, because we really are at a important moment of transition. So, for example, on the transatlantic partnerships, the subjects and the alliances that'll be part of Heat 2, we have this big shift that is taking place, concurrently in terms of the meetings that are going on overseas this week, where we're seeing a shift of NATO turning towards, as Kaylee mentioned, the renewed interest and focus on Indo-Pacific as opposed to traditional alliances. So there's an area where we're seeing a really big reimagining and shift for an institution that is decades old. Similarly, just this morning, the White House released a new strategy for tackling domestic extremism, an area that I work on. And that is the first time that an administration has had a national strategy for that issue. So, and I'm sure for a variety of the issues that our presenters will be describing today, there's so many important pivot points and really big moves forward that we are making in so many areas of national security.
I think that's right. One area I'm hoping to see some movement on is the way that we collect, use, and share data, which sounds like a really wonky technical thing, but really that's how we know what we know, by the way that our data is collected and shared. How about you, Shai?
Well, first of all, I'll just say the chat continues to be awesome. Doug Samuelson weighs in for Kaylee, and he says, "Take heart, Kaylee. The Middle East is not going away. It has a way of reintruding on our decision processes every time we try to pivot away." So I feel like Doug, Mr. Samuelson, is both foreshadowing, but also maybe rooting for your field.
So I don't know if I want to root for my own job security, but at the same time, rooting for the Middle East to always be, the redheaded problem child, or is not the way to go. So how to hold up on that.
All right. Well, thank you, Doug. There you have it. For me, so I feel like one of the things I love about working at CNAS, and I'm not saying this as a commercial for CNAS, but I get to learn about things that I never thought about before. And I love talking about this conversation I had with Martin Rasser, who is from the technology and security team here at CNAS. And when he sat down one day and explained to me in very, very concrete terms that a comms guy could understand what Open RAN is and how it's a software-based way to achieve some of the infrastructure-based ways we're trying to improve our networks. It might be a good way of competing or advancing beyond the challenges around 5G. That's the extent to which I deeply understand that issue. But I just love the idea that while everyone's worrying about doing things one way in one box, there are people creating a whole new box and a whole new set of rules that could bring us to the next level. And so for me, it's those never thought of before things that will change the game that I love hearing about. And so that makes me pretty excited. Now, we are, by the way, moments away from our first heat beginning, everyone. So I think after Jimmy weighs in, we'll be ready. So contestants, get ready. Love seeing all the people in the chat, seeing more and more viewers log on. So Kate, back to you or to Jimmy. How do you want to do it next?
Yeah, Jimmy, jump in.
I'll just say, the thing that I'm really excited about is anywhere where we can start talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion in this national security space. It's going to warm my heart. So, that's something that if any of the contestants touch on that, I think that's something that we can't overlook as well. So, can't wait.
Great. Well, before we introduce our first contestants, we do want to note that our contestants today are all speaking in their personal capacity and that their views expressed are not reflective of their employers or of CNAS. With that, Shai, what do we have on deck?
All right, so here's how it's here. Oh, I should put myself in the box here. All right, here's how it's going to work. Here's how it's going to work today. When we're doing our heats, we're going to move really quickly, so everyone listen really closely. We will bring up our contestants one by one. We're just going to introduce their names, do a quick sound check, and then they're going to be off to the races. Once each heat is finished, we will bring our contestants back one by one, and they will get to hear questions, one question each from one of our judges where they can expand further. But again, if you have questions for them, drop them in the chat, put them on Twitter, #CNAS 2021. And up next, we have James Mersel, our first contestant. James, you are now in the big box. Or you're almost in the big box.
Yes.
I'm moving you into the big box. My screen may have frozen. Are you there? Jarrell, I might need you to oh, there we go. Okay.
Yep.
James, you're in the big box. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Awesome. All right. So, and then we can hear you, which means your time begins now.
Great. In the last 6 weeks alone, there have been at least 3 major cyber incidents that have revealed critical vulnerabilities. For government agencies, patching these vulnerabilities comes on top of following recommendations from the Cybersecurity Solarium Commission and congressional modernization mandates, and they lack the capacity to get ahead of our adversaries in the cyber domain. The workforce shortage isn't limited to the government alone, however. According to the National Initiative for Cybersecurity Education, as of March of this year, there were over 460,000 unfilled cybersecurity positions across the United States. There aren't enough qualified applicants, and we cannot afford to wait for educational initiatives to close that gap. Instead, to create a proactive solution to cybersecurity for challenges of both today and tomorrow, I propose the national security community led by the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency establish a civilian cybersecurity corps. This corps, or CCC, would be made up of volunteer experts in the private sector who are brought in to assist federal agencies with network resiliency. The CCC would build upon already successful partnerships such as the Pentagon's Bug Bounty Program and U.S. Digital Response, an initiative that aided federal, state, and local governments during the early days of the COVID-19 pandemic. The USDR was able to develop online resources in a matter of days, in some cases doubling the size of IT teams. The CCC would enable that same efficiency and capacity on a national level. Furthermore, the program could expand to help state and local governments, which are increasingly the targets of ransomware in particular. The greatest incentive for the volunteers in this initiative is patriotism, giving leaders in the field the opportunity to lend their expertise and serve their nation, even if they do not wish to pursue a long-term career in public service. Additionally, it gives rising stars in cybersecurity valuable experience in a unique way. Securing the latest productivity app is one thing. Securing a healthcare records management system for the VA is quite another. We can't undo the damage already done by malicious actors, but together we can be proactive in hardening our defenses against the next attack and the ones to follow. Thank you.
All right, thanks so much. Now please welcome Walker Mills. His pitch is ending single fuel dogma and opening the door to alternative fuels.
Walker, can you hear us? Getting a little bit of a fuzzy picture from Walker. Walker, can you hear us?
Yep, I can. Can you hear me?
Yep. It took a few seconds to get you through the pipeline of the internet, but I think we're okay now. So just do another quick sound check. Walker, you can hear us?
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you. Oh, great. So your time begins now.
Hi, my pitch is for the United States military to rewrite the single fuel concept. The single fuel concept is a policy that standardizes the use of only a few types of petroleum-based fuels across the U.S. military and NATO forces. It dates from the 1980s and 90s when logisticians were focused on making it easier to get bulk fuel to the nation's armies. However, the policy has the unintended effect of limiting and holding back on the development and acquisition of alternative fuels, even when those fuels can be safer and more efficient than legacy petroleum fuels. One example of a promising alternative fuel is hydrogen. Hydrogen is more than twice as energy dense as legacy petroleum fuels. And recent research at MIT has shown that it can be generated with aluminum and water reactions. And that means that it doesn't need large amounts of external energy input for things like electrolysis to generate the hydrogen. This means that US forces could generate the electrical power and the hydrogen they need to sustain their operational energy needs at the tactical edge of the battlefield. And they wouldn't need to rely on large amounts of diesel and gasoline trucked in. Shifting some of the military's platforms to run on hydrogen would also help reduce the DoD's contribution to climate change and provide opportunities to work with close allies and partners like Australia and Japan that already have national hydrogen strategies. Today, the military does experiment with and prototype alternative fuels, but they're caught in a trap. Acquisition officials don't want to procure platforms that don't have energy infrastructure, and logisticians don't want to sustain fuels when there isn't a demand from platforms. But changing the single fuel concept is a big step that the military can take to help promote the adoption of alternative fuels that make US forces more lethal and more resilient. Thank you.
Thanks, Walker. Next, we have Bethan Saunders. Her pitch is Ensuring America's Military Edge Through Climate Technology Innovation.
All right, Bethan, let's do a quick sound check. Can you hear us?
Good morning. I can hear you loud and clear. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, and that means your time begins now.
Since 2017, climate-related damages to U.S. military bases have cost taxpayers over $13 billion. Climate change effects like severe drought and storms can destabilize societies, enabling conflict and terrorist activity that puts significant pressure on the U.S. military. However, the Defense Department is one of the largest greenhouse gas emitters on the planet. With over 1,700 DoD installations at risk from rising sea levels, the Defense Department must invest in cutting-edge climate technology to ensure a resilient defense infrastructure and a climate-ready force. The Defense Innovation Unit, or DIU, is the ideal organization to drive these investments. First, it's the only DoD organization focused exclusively on rapidly scaling commercial technology. The DIU's procurement agility can also advance the integration of critical climate technologies across the entire Defense Department. The DIU has 6 technology focus areas: advanced energy materials, AI, autonomy, cyber, human systems, and space. I propose adding climate technology as a new focus area. With this mandate, the DIU can invest in the transformational climate technologies that will strengthen U.S. national security and military readiness. For example, the DIU can scale and expand commercial technologies to build more efficient microgrids on military bases, develop smart charging infrastructure to support electric combat vehicles, and advance solar drone capabilities. Proactively deploying these climate technologies will not only improve the lethality and resilience of our military forces, but it will support U.S. job growth and strengthen our global leadership in competition with China. Creating a climate technology focus area for the DIU is an innovative change that will enhance infrastructure resilience, support domestic manufacturing and economic security, and prepare our military for conflicts in an uncertain future and a changing climate. Thank you.
Thank you, Bethan. And last in our heat, we have John Verolik. John's pitch is the Democracy Seed Fund, leveraging a venture capital approach to defeat digital authoritarianism.
Hi, everyone.
All right, John, just making sure we can hear. We can hear you. Can you hear us?
I can. Thanks very much.
All right, your time begins now.
On the first day of this conference, Amy Studdart posed the question, if China is our competitor, what are our competitive advantages? It's a question we must answer correctly to compete effectively. The Pentagon says military overmatch, and liberal internationalists say it's the US-centered rules-based order. But China can and is eroding both through its own military buildup and the export of its system of digital authoritarianism. I would say our key competitive advantage is both more core and more durable than either of these. I'm talking about the chaotic, vibrant innovativeness of American society, one which prizes creative destruction and valorizes the risk-taking entrepreneur. We're the innovation leader, and we need to compete on our terrain. So to leverage this competitive advantage in chaotic innovation, I'm pitching the Democracy Seed Fund. We're a US government venture fund that will provide thousands of small injections of seed capital to launch a new generation of startups founded by a diverse group of innovators with creative ideas for disrupting digital authoritarianism. I'll give you some examples to make it tangible. In Silicon Valley, we'll offer capital that incentivizes entrepreneurs to work on things like unfilterable blockchain messaging or the next generation Tor browser, rather than just more effectively targeting me on Instagram. We'll look globally to entrepreneurs worldwide, whether they're Egyptian coders building an app to monitor the plight of the Uyghurs, or Pakistani democracy activists seeking to defeat the exported Chinese social credit surveillance system. Many of these are going to fail, and that's okay. The fund's premise is making 1 to 10 bets with 100 or 1,000 to 1 payoffs. Only one has to work for the whole thing to be a success. And in the meantime, we'll force the hierarchical, centralized CCP to deal with 1,000 innovative cuts every year. It's an old military joke that America succeeds in wartime because war is chaos, and America practices chaos on a daily basis. So let's create some innovative chaos and be confident that embracing freedom, diversity, and the market is a winning strategy against a hierarchical autocracy. Thanks.
Thanks, John. So now for our judges to weigh in on some questions. First, James will bring you back up, and Kaylee will ask you the first question.
Right.
Hi, James. Thank you so much for joining us today and for a great presentation. You touched on this briefly, the recruitment aspect for your civilian cybersecurity corps. Wanted to make sure the CC, right? Yes. But I'm curious about how you would kind of approach recruitment beyond just the patriotism component, given that we would be competing with potentially more lucrative career paths.
Right. Well, I envision it as something similar to how the military reserves function, saying we're not asking you to make a full-time commitment. We're not asking you to leave your job permanently. That's one of the biggest challenges that the U.S. national community has right now, trying to compete with the salaries of Google or Facebook or anything else in Silicon Valley. But saying, if you can donate a weekend or two a month or a couple weeks out of a year, finding where the need can fit. So if it's a simple task that can be done in a couple of days or over time, finding people who match with that need very well, and finding if it's a longer thing where someone can donate a couple weeks, a month, whatever it may be, a longer term project, working to find the experts that would fit that niche especially well.
Great. Now we'll bring back Walker and Jimmy. Ask away.
Walker, first, thank you for this. I haven't heard about this. So you're really talking about sort of transitioning from this legacy fuel, single fuel concept to more of this forward-leaning hydrogen alternative, right? So you touched on it a little bit, but I want you to delve a little bit deeper into the acquisition sort of trap, right? Can you speak a little bit more to what barriers would be in the way to this transition, and then broaden it out for a sec on the international impacts. You talked a little bit about Australia and Japan, and so those two questions.
Sure. Thanks for the question, Jimmy. So I think in terms of acquisitions, like I was kind of describing the trap, the issue is not necessarily that the single fuel concept prohibits the investment or acquisition of platforms that would run on alternative fuels, but it contributes to a mindset where nobody, and whether that's program managers or services or communities of interest, want to take that first leap and acquire a platform that uses a different type of fuel. And so I think rewriting the concept to make it clear that we are, we do want to have kind of some standard fuels, but we want to also be investing in the future and looking for the next fuel that we can use as a standard. And I appreciate your follow on about the international community, because I think hydrogen is somewhere that we're seeing some of our close allies and partners, like I mentioned, Japan and Australia, but you also see this in France and other countries in Europe, are starting to lean heavily into hydrogen because there's a lot of ways to generate it, and then you can use it as a plug and play fuel for electric vehicles and electric platforms. So I think it has a lot of promise, but especially because the United States is shifting to be more interested in the Pacific, those nations are well posed to help or jointly develop should we say, hydrogen infrastructure that the U.S. Military can also leverage.
Great, thank you. And now we'll bring back Bethan and Carrie. Ask away.
Great. Thanks, Kate. Bethan, thanks so much for your presentation. I thought that you made a very persuasive presentation and argument. My question for you, and this gets to one broader theme that other panelists will be talking about later, which is the institution. So you're proposing a change to the Defense Department. You're proposing a new role and mission for the Defense Innovation Unit. If you were, let's say instead of briefing us as part of this competition, you were briefing this to leadership of the Defense Department or of the Defense Innovation Unit, what would they tell you for why this can't be done? Why aren't they doing it already? What would they tell you would be the roadblocks that then, as you're thinking through this proposal, you would want to overcome?
Absolutely. Definitely when you think of an institution as large and bureaucratic as the Defense Department, this is definitely something I was thinking about when I was brainstorming my pitch. I think a big pushback would be, well, we're already doing advanced energy materials, we're already doing AI, we've got these 6 portfolios, we don't have time or space for another one. Another pushback could be, okay, we have AFWorks, Army Futures Command, Navy X also working on innovation units. Why should we empower the DIU to do this? My responses to both of those would be, first, the DIU is set up to be very agile and flexible. From my conversation with folks there, the portfolios already work in tandem on a lot of areas and innovations. So the climate change technology portfolio would fit right in and work across the existing 6. It would just elevate the priority and empower smaller startups and other non-traditional DoD vendors to push forward their climate technology, which is a rapidly growing commercial sector we need to leverage. And then, of course, on the other hand, the DIU has commercial engagement teams, which have direct relationships to Silicon Valley that the other innovation units across those different services do not have. So there are very clear benefits to empowering the DIU to have this, and that would be my response to those obstacles.
Great. Thanks very much for that response.
Yeah, thank you.
And lastly, we'll bring John back, and Tina, please ask your question.
Hi, John. First, I love your idea of bolstering what America does best, which is our unparalleled innovation ecosystem. So one question I have for you is, could you describe a little bit more about the application process for startups competing for these grants? What will they be evaluated on? And are there certain issues that will be prioritized over others?
Thanks, Tina. That's a great question. So I think one of the things that has to work for the Democracy Seed Fund to work is that we have to be able to move as quickly as private sector capital, as venture capital. I think one of the big problems that certainly you see some of the organizations Bethan's talking about, like DIUX and InQtel and so forth, that they seek to address in kind of traditional funding models, or grant making, is it's a slow process. So I think that setting up the Democracy Seed Fund as a separate and government nonprofit with its own investment board and its own considerable autonomy to make investment decisions on a rapid basis is essential. I see them putting out a call for applications and focusing on 2 or 3 key areas. I think one of them is basically hacking the Great Firewall. I think that restricting free speech around the world and restricting both the economic and the political side of that is a real problem, and we should be really forthrightly addressing it. I think another one is supporting human rights. I think the fact that China is oppressing a considerable portion of its population is something that we should be holding their feet to the fire for. And I think that that has playing the realpolitik hardball. China shouldn't be able to get away for free for being the largest repressor of Muslims anywhere in the world and have getting closer relationships with places like Iran and Saudi Arabia. So I would say that those are the first 2, but I think really some of the strength of the Democracy Seed Fund is the breadth of the portfolio. If you've got a good idea that's going to make the CCP's life hard and we can get you off the ground for $100,000, we should be investing in that kind of regardless of what the subject area might be.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Thanks.
Excellent. So thank you to our first heat. While our judges go to submit their rankings, we're going to pivot to the subject of our next category, reimagining America's alliances and partnerships. So why don't we start here with a poll, Shai? So the poll question is, which leaders level meeting during President Biden's first foreign trip will prove to be the most consequential for future U.S. national security? Your options here are the G7, the EU summit, the NATO summit, or the Geneva summit with Russia.
I think this is could we pick a better time? I mean, Carrie talked about this earlier this week. Could we pick earlier today? Could we pick a better time to be doing the pitch when the president's on his first foreign trip with, like, you know, this quartet of summits that are happening, plus all the bilats on the side? We only had, like, technically room for 4 in our multiple choice. Otherwise, we could have picked any one of these meetings. So, and I know that we have a huge and awesome audience on right now, and I would love to see what people are voting for in this particular situation, because I think it's really there's going to be a real it's really going to depend on what people are emphasizing. Are people most interested in the China developments, or the way the G7 approached China? Are they looking at NATO and the EU, and how the United States is re-engaging with those allies, or of course the big one-on-one with the president and Vladimir Putin? That's another big moment, I think, long time coming in a way. That I think people will be really interested. And of course, once our judges are finished scoring, I will be dying to hear what they think. Now, Kate, how about you? You've been watching the developments with all of us here at the center. Of this week's meetings, which one is the biggest, do you think is going to have the biggest impact?
I think the Geneva summit with Russia, there's no way to get around the significance of that, particularly as we look forward to near-peer competitors. And I think even people who are not Europe watchers are tuning in to see what happens there.
Very cool. Well, our judges look like they're starting to get their scores in. So, Carrie, you want to get in on this? The poll question, what do you think was the biggest meeting of the week?
I think NATO. I mentioned earlier, I think the significance of the evolving NATO relationship is really interesting. Certainly, there's a lot of dynamics around the Putin meeting, but I don't actually expect for there to be really substantial changes and any kind of changed relationship coming out of that. But some of the messaging coming out of the NATO meetings, we talked earlier about the shift towards prioritizing Indo-Pacific, which is just really an enormous change in focus for that organization, as well as some of the statements that have been coming out regarding renewed focus for that alliance to focus on malign cyber activity. I think those are the forward-looking areas, and that's where it seems like the NATO meetings, they're really looking ahead as to what is the real depth of the 21st century vision of this alliance going to be.
Very, very cool. Kaylee, how about you? Which one was the big meeting of the week?
I think the Geneva summit may give us the hottest headlines, but I have to echo Carrie's vote for the NATO summit. I mean, not just thinking about the Indo-Pacific, but if we also are, thinking about this in the context of countering Russian aggression, NATO is going to be one of the most important players there. So really, how the U.S. is interacting with all of those partners is what I'm keeping my eye on.
And we've got some folks talking in the comments, but they haven't given away their answers yet. But there's a lot of really, really great messages to all of our different contestants, and a lot of cheering on going on here, and great representation again from the NatSec Girl Squad. Another lots of shout outs going out there. So that's really, really great to see that group's out in full force. Okay, Tina, what was the big meeting of the week?
I feel like I'm just furthering this echo chamber, but I would also have to say the NATO summit. I do think that, America's dedication to NATO was questioned in recent years. And so this was time to rekindle our relationships with the NATO countries and also reaffirm our commitment to Article 5. So that was the one I was keeping my eye out on.
Very cool. All right, Jimmy, what do you got for us?
Yeah, I'll go 4 for 4 here. Certainly the NATO summit. It's probably, being in more of the domestic space now for me. I see a separation sometimes with seeing things that are going on in the international, but I've certainly paid most attention to NATO for all the reasons, especially what Tina just said.
All right, so let's take a look at what the audience had to say. And I think with little surprise, the audience agrees that the NATO summit is the most consequential meeting that will take place this week.
I will say I voted for the G7 because I feel like it was going to set the tone for the whole thing. And you had so many different, the actors are from all around the world. And the fact that you were able to get those statements on China, probably the strongest statements on China in a G7, at least definitely recently, maybe of all time, I think of all time. Yeah. That I think that was a big signal as to where the world's major economies and democracies are at right now. Sorry, back to you, Kate.
Yeah, and I think the G7 also provided us that great, if not very memeable photo op, which I think we'll be seeing in the national security community for a while here. So we have about 10 minutes until our next heat starts, and a reminder that you'll be able to vote for the People's Choice Award after our third heat. But to take this in a fun direction, we have another poll focused on multilateral organizations. So you may not know this, but my co-host is a real big movie and TV buff, and he snuck this question in under the wire.
That is right. I take responsibility, but I feel like these are the kind of questions that you get to ask in a cutting edge event. And I'm just saying in advance, it will mean a lot to me, one of your co-hosts here today, if we just light up the chat. Everyone should just light up the chat with your answers when you get this question. All
right. So our next poll question: which is the most effective fictitious multilateral organization? The Rebel Alliance from Star Wars, the United Federation of Planets from Star Trek, the Fellowship of the Ring from Lord of the Rings, or the Avengers from the Marvel Cinematic Universe?
That's right, folks. This is your chance to weigh in. Take a moment to stretch your creative brains. In the meantime, I want to read some of the excellent comments on our last, much more substantive question, which is Doug Samuelson writes, "What happens in the EU will drive and constrain what happens in NATO." And Peter P. Gisela says, "This question is 2 categories, 1 to 3 on Europe, take a pick, and Putin, another separate important clarity moment." So Peter challenging the premise of that last multiple choice, putting them putting Putin in a separate category. And then Doug also adds, "One of Russia's big efforts in the past 5 years has been politically and economically undermining European nations' connections to the leading NATO nations." So I think that shows you a little bit more of why NATO must have done so well, because it seems to be it's at the intersection of the Russia question that's sort of implicit in that, as well as the Europe component of it. And as I'm often also reminded by my great colleagues at the State Department, we're a member of NATO, and a pretty important component of that. And so the agency there, being part of that organization, is really important. We're also getting some great chats for our playful question here. Let's see. We've got Tucker Jones says the fellowship was objectively successful in achieving its singular goal. Now, I would say that in the big picture, yes, but did the fellowship stay together or did it break at the end of the first book? And then Dustin's putting in a good word for unit from Doctor Who. So just going off. Now Tucker Jones making a really important conversation point about revolutions and pushing back against authoritarian regimes. Rebel Alliance failed to consolidate their gains and achieve effective post-war governance. A total disaster. So we're getting some really deep connections. Again, that's part of my case as to why movies are just awesome to talk about. We've also got Connell Jarvis is back with, but the Federation manages effective control over hundreds of planets. Okay, so that's a case for the Federation. And then Andrea says the Fellowship is too dependent on strong personalities. And Katie asks about the Order of the Phoenix. This is amazing. This is the best chat, I think, in the history of national security events. I am so grateful. I love to know we're a few minutes away from Heat 2, but let's hear what our judges think. You have the floor. Carrie, who do you think of those organizations was the most effective?
Okay, so you're starting with me, but I am literally the least equipped person to weigh in on this question, which is why, because you gave me a little bit of a heads up that this question was coming, Shai, I consulted with the experts in my family. And so the
You didn't watch 4 movies last night.
So the House answer is the Federation of Planets, because of, as I think one of your participants in the chat said, it covered such a wide range of entities or planets. And also, I think it lasted a really long time. So House answer is the Federation of Planets from Star Trek.
All right. Thank you to Carrie and the House. All right, let's go over to Jimmy. Jimmy's laughing over there. Maybe he's got a similar or maybe a different answer.
It's the Rebel Alliance, but only because it's stateless. It's this very, just kind of like these dissidents off countries that are, it's a very strange resistance, right? And so I don't know, that's the one I lean to, but there's no international IR context for me. It's just all about thinking back when I was a child watching it. So that's it.
All right. You like the stateless border, cross-border element of it? Oh, great. We are, by the way, 2 minutes out from Heat 2, everyone. Tina, where are you on the poll?
Well, I have to say, Katie and I conspired for the Order of the Phoenix, but I similarly had to consult some friends about this question, and they also told me United Federation of the Planets because they're an actual government system that functions without a constant looming threat, while the others were formed in response to a threat. So...
Wow. All right. That's great. Dropping the IR concepts in there. Thank you. Or maybe the comparative government concepts. But either way, terrific. All right, Kaylee, you're going to take us home before we reveal the results and we get Heat 2 up here. Kaylee.
Well, I guess we're leaving the Avengers out in the cold because I'm going to go with the Fellowship. I think for many of the reasons people are saying they wouldn't vote for that is the reason I did. In addition to achieving its goal, I think it's an interesting way to think about a multilateral org not actually being durable and kind of the flexibility and agility of getting a bunch of different in this case races of creatures together to achieve and combat a threat with the idea that it was only going to exist for that kind of short duration. And then further, sometimes, Andrea, you don't get to choose whether or not you're working with strong personalities or not. So while it may have relied on them, I think it also showed how even with conflict and kind of a lack of cohesiveness, you can still achieve a goal.
Awesome.
All right. So let's see what the audience had to say. I think it was a close vote, but Star Trek, the United Federation of Planets, came out on top. I love everyone's justifications rooted in IR theory. I think that's excellent. All right, Shari, are we ready for our next heat?
I believe we are ready for our next heat. We're going to get Rachel Brooks up on the stage. Rachel, there you are. We're going to get you in the big box. Rachel, can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, which means your time begins now.
A critical threat to national security is information warfare propagated across computer screens worldwide as we speak. Research from MIT Sloan and elsewhere found that false news stories spread faster and farther than true ones. With social media's amplification potential and global reach, information warfare is happening at an alarming rate, and we need a better toolkit to address this evolving problem. That's why I propose a United States-led global alliance of democracies against disinformation. Disinformation, or deliberately false or misleading information with the intent to deceive, is a rampant challenge across social media platforms. It's an especially heinous problem in how it often targets our democracy's underpinnings, like elections and free speech. Combinations of bots and people spread false information that can manipulate public opinion, intensify existing social divides, and heighten fear, as noted by the National Endowment for Democracy, among others. The US has an opportunity to lead a global alliance of states and institutions to defend democracy from these digital threats. In reimagining America's alliances and partnerships to meet today's needs, this network creates a coordinated approach to identify and mitigate nefarious actors propagating false information. So, how will it work? Democratic states and institutions meeting the desired criteria can join and contribute to a network of real-time information sharing about campaigns targeting democracies. With the US at the helm, this alliance allows collaboration among trusted partners from the UK and Germany to Australia and South Korea to act cooperatively and decisively to tackle sources of false information. The reason this alliance is so crucial is that no state or sector can solve this challenge alone. The nature of the threat evolves across adversaries and targets, making cooperation needed. The more we partner and learn through information sharing, the better prepared all parties are to stop information disorders from further eroding trust in democracy and society. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Next, we have Andrew Hanna. His pitch is Collective Maritime Security in the Mediterranean.
All right, hold on, getting Andrew up here. And Andrew, before Andrew starts, Andrew is going to add an official disclaimer. So your time is not going to begin now. Andrew, go ahead and give your disclaimer if you can hear me, and then I'll tell you when you can start.
Hi, Shai. I can hear you. And my disclaimer is just that my views represent my own and not those of the United States Institute of Peace.
All right. Thank you, Andrew. Andrew, that's a great way to do our sound check, and your time begins now.
In 1949, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization was founded to counter the #1 threat to transatlantic security, a Soviet land invasion of Europe. But today, threats to transatlantic security emanate from the seas. Russia is encroaching into maritime spaces in North Africa. Human trafficking continues across the Mediterranean and into southern Europe, and weapons flow unmitigated into the hands of violent extremists in North Africa. NATO was successful because it brought together the continental powers of Europe to address a land-based threat. Today, America needs to organize the coastal states of the Mediterranean littoral to address seaborne challenges. My proposal is that the US should organize a maritime coalition between Southern European and North African coastal states. Its mission would be threefold. It would counter Russia's presence in the Mediterranean, it would curb human trafficking, and it would enforce the Libya arms embargo. Why these states? Well, these are the states that have both the will and the capability to do something about the problem and project power into the Mediterranean. For example, Egypt has 2 helicopter carriers and is the only state with those naval capabilities in North Africa. These states would pool their resources into a single combined maritime task force, and America is uniquely positioned to play an organizational role here. By bringing together traditional European allies and emerging military partners in North Africa, America can achieve and secure its national security interests in the Mediterranean for far more cheaply than it currently does. And it can secure and complement NATO by securing its southern flank against Russia and instability. America needs to rethink collective security to adapt to the challenges of the 21st century. By looking at collective security from a trans-Mediterranean perspective, America can do so. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Andrew. Now we'll hear from Sophia Laugo. Sophia's pitch is Global Institutions for Biomedical Data.
Hello? Oops. Hello?
Shai, I think you are on mute.
Oh, just kidding. I'm the one on mute. Sophia, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, good. So the good news is your audio is fine. I'm the person who accidentally muted himself.
Okay, great.
So we are. So since we can hear you and you can hear us, are you ready to go?
I'm ready to go.
Awesome. Your time begins now.
The U.S. has long enjoyed a hegemonic and guiding position in global scientific enterprise. But the world is changing. China, for example, is soon to catch up to the U.S. in scientific research impact, perhaps by 2025, according to the Times Higher Education. Debate on GMOs, germline genome editing, and potentially leaked bioengineered specimens rage on. On the home front, as we experience a scientific process live through the pandemic, appetite from the American people to look behind the curtain of opaque scientific processes is at an all-time high. My proposal is that the NIH and a new U.S. executive level body take the lead in creating a global institution governing upstream processes in life sciences and patient data. The body will work to harmonize international regulations and standards of practice for labs and clinical trials. Most urgently, we need mutually adopted frameworks for issues of privacy, security, and knowledge sharing. But let's talk about who should govern. Scientific processes are indelibly intertwined with public lives and social contexts. A multi-stakeholder approach should not include just science experts, but rather a broad range of international stakeholders impacted by the activities of life sciences, from bioethicists to providers, research agencies, politicians, and civil society organizations. Next, let's talk about the how to govern. And the answer is transparently. As we watch this live open pitch competition, we are reminded that we are in the age of transparency. Complicated concepts, whether that be CRISPR or mRNA-based vaccines, they can become more familiar to the public if we allow them to be. Like this conference today, virtually inviting public interaction with global lab networks and regulatory discussions with embedded tools to capture feedback could help test or rally support for global science that is truly of and for its global benefactors, and not just for its scientists. One that is democratic and protective of human rights and American biosecurity interests. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophia. Finally, please welcome Abigail Wolf, whose pitch is on reimagining alliances to incentivize responsible mineral supply chains.
Hi, Abigail. Just doing a quick sound check. Can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, which means your time begins now.
Thank you, and good afternoon. Today, we find ourselves on the precipice of the next industrial revolution that will be fueled by critical minerals and is increasingly dominated by the Chinese Communist Party. Critical minerals underlie our electric vehicles, microchips, and weapon systems, and China is the largest producer and processor of these minerals, including lithium, cobalt, and rare earth elements, for which the United States is more than 50% import reliant. Beijing dominates the critical minerals market by producing and selling lower cost minerals, often by degrading their environment and exploiting their workers. This makes it incredibly difficult to fairly compete. For example, China has allowed its largest rare earth mine to create a toxic lake of sludge, and they were most recently called out by G7 and NATO for perpetrating human rights abuses in Xinjiang, where the majority of our polysilicon for solar panels is produced. It's time to remove our global blinders and join with our allies to invest in supply chains that truly reflect our values, and blockchain can help. Working with like-minded nations, we can create a new marketplace for sustainably sourced goods centered around high environmental, labor, and climate standards. But standards alone still need to be verified. Therefore, I propose we create a label based off of these standards and using blockchain that will be immutable, transparent, and trustworthy. We should also empower the Blue Dot Network to track and verify these standards with blockchain, from greenhouse gas emissions to human rights, from mine to market. This will help bring back critical supply chains to the United States and our allies and reduce our dependence upon Chinese Communist Party policies that are militant toward democracy, harmful to human rights, and detrimental to the environment. This will ensure our workers don't lose out in the race to the bottom and instead can create a new race to the top for a future we can all be proud of. Thank you.
Thank you, Abigail. All right, so now we will return with our judges who will each ask one question of one of each of the contestants. So first up, we'll bring back Rachel and Tina. Please ask your question.
Hi, Rachel.
Oh, wait, hang on. Got to find Rachel. There's Rachel. There you are.
All right, we good to go?
We're
awesome.
Good.
Hey, Rachel, I really love your idea of creating an institution to combat disinformation. We know that in recent years that this has been a huge problem. So a couple questions for you. First is, how would you determine which states would be allowed to join the alliance? And what are the enforcement mechanisms for countries in the alliance in the event that they may become involved with disinformation campaigns in the future?
These are fantastic questions. Thank you so much for asking them. And particularly with the second one, we know that oftentimes states are the ones propagating disinformation across the board. But I think that there could be rigorous criteria of having to share a certain number of incidents of disinformation and just making sure that it's a two-way street of countries and states and parties giving in that information and also receiving it to act cooperatively with a strict kind of you're out if you breach those sort of restrictions that are decided upon by the group. I also think starting with G7 countries to address your first question would be kind of thinking about leading global democracies, but also working towards greater representation. So bringing in more parties from the Indo-Pacific region, looking at Australia, South Korea, and others.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, now we'll bring back Andrew and Carrie. Please ask your question.
Great. Hello, Andrew. Welcome back. Thank you for your presentation. I'm curious, I want to ask you a little bit more about your proposal for a new maritime alliance in the Mediterranean. In particular, and you touched on this a little bit, but I'd like you to expand on it a little bit more. Can you articulate in a little bit more detail why it is that you think the U.S. should be in the position of putting together this alliance of Southern European and Northern African countries for this Mediterranean maritime alliance? What is it that is in the U.S. national security interests to serve in this coordinating role?
Sure, Carrie. So I think that the role the U.S. plays in this alliance would be organizational. It wouldn't be the main contributor of forces to it. It would be helping bring together the partnerships that it has, that its unique capability that the United States has is that it has many alliances of different types and formats. So it has many bilateral alliances and relationships in North Africa that European states don't have, and it's in NATO with these Southern European countries, and that's not something North African states have. So number one is organizational. Number two is that the United States is looking for a way to secure its interests in these regions, but do it far more cheaply than it currently does. There's a resource question and a resource problem. And if the United States can get its partners who are already there, who already have the capabilities to step up and get them to do things like enforce the arms embargo in Libya, it will help create stability, and so that the US doesn't have to worry about this problem as it focuses on its other challenges in the rest of the world.
Okay, thank you very much for that response.
Great. Next, we'll bring back Sophia and we'll have Jimmy ask a question.
Thank you, Sophia. One of the things that stuck out to me about your presentation is this very sort of intermestic nature of it. And so, U.S. diminishing role in scientific rates, how do you address that? So the first question I have is about, you said the scientific processes and making it more transparent, the age of transparency. Is that, what sort of, you talked about civil society organizations, but is there any play with like private sector or any of those folks? And if so, what is their role in this, as they are the ones who would be, about transparency and leaning processes. So over to you for that.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Jimmy. So for me, the U.S. as a hegemonic power since the World War has acted as a linchpin in creating and stabilizing the liberal international order. And just like you said, the private industry is very important to this. As part of the same multi-stakeholder construct, I would recommend not just civil society organizations Why civil society organizations? Because we want to get a read on what publics are thinking, not just companies, but actually groups that represent publics and the public sphere. But also we want to protect commercial interests because we understand the economy of innovation. So the economy of innovation is something that the U.S. has always protected in establishing the international world order. A U.S.-led scientific world order would do the same. So I do think it's important to bring in private actors. This includes pharmaceutical companies. This might include think tanks that are private. This might include distributors. It might include many different actors. But certainly commercializing science and the economy of innovation is really important to promoting innovation. Certainly should be a part, of course, representation and how much is taken by countries versus civil society organizations versus nonprofit actors versus regulators. That would be the question to allocating the actual positions.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Great. And then lastly, we'll bring back Abigail, who will receive her question from Kaylee.
Abigail, thank you so much for your really interesting pitch. You made it sound like we can, create a new marketplace by leveraging blockchain technology just out of thin air. So my follow-up question to you, especially from a US perspective, is who's doing what? So more specifically, to narrow that a bit for you, what would step one be and who would be taking that first step?
Step one would be leveraging our current strategic partnerships. So I mentioned the Blue Dot initiative, which already works with Japan and Australia to make sure that infrastructure projects are done to high standards. So the first step would be going out and identifying all those different parts of the supply chain and bringing them up to a uniform digitization standard so that they can apply this blockchain. The second part is working with our allies to figure out what kind of blockchain that might be, whether it's a public one, a private one, or a mix of the two, could help determine whether our private partners, which we really need included in this blockchain, whether they would feel comfortable divulging information. I would argue for a mix. Next, it would be on top of the technology that just really tracks when one thing goes from point A to point B, we need to make sure that we have the human factor layered on top of the blockchain. So that includes setting these ESG standards and then working with on-the-ground auditors to develop relationships with these supply chain suppliers to make sure that they are upholding these standards, which internationally we have set.
Wonderful. Well, thank you to all of our Heat 2 contestants. And we are, we'll have about 12 minutes till our next event, which is the presentation of the Vasevich Award here at CNAS. But in the meantime, what are some first impressions after seeing the last two heats from our judges?
Don't worry, you don't have to give away any of your votes. Some trends or some of the things that you really liked. What are you seeing right now at this? I would say we're like at the 2/3 point. If this was a hockey game, Carrie, you're a big hockey fan, right? If this was a hockey game, this is where like the locker room break happens. Is that right? This is like halftime in hockey.
I would jump in. I don't know anything about hockey, but I would jump in and say. I would say there's a very tangible element in each of the presentations. Folks pointed to direct entities that could take up these challenges, and that's rare, right? You could it's great to think big and be strategic, but there was an operational element in each of the presentations that I appreciated. So that's my take.
All right, Carrie, your thoughts.
Well, I think one of the interesting sort of themes from this last heat is the confidence that our presenters had in the power of alliances and the ability to create new organizations. One of the questions, we only did one question per judge per person, but a question that I found myself sort of repeatedly kind of writing down in one way or another was, is there really space to create a whole new alliance? Are there existing international alliances or existing partnerships that could be leveraged to address some of the problems that we have today? And so I think, that's one of the challenges that we all in this space are dealing with is, do we need to be constantly creating new partnerships, new alliances? And if so, what does that mean for some of these legacy partnerships and legacy international organizations that we tend to think are not working, but we're not really addressing that? We're just saying, well, let's create something new. So on one hand, I'm encouraged by the confidence that our presenters have in the international community's ability to create new partnerships and alliances. At the same time, I wonder if we also need to be thinking about the alliances and the partnerships that we currently have and how to fix them or make them better.
That's great. Tina, would you like to weigh in?
Yeah, I just want to say that I'm really enjoying seeing the passion from all of the competitors. I think that is like the biggest selling point that you could have, is just showing how passionate you are about your pitch, and just knowing that these folks have been thinking about these ideas for so long. That's what I'm mostly enjoying about this whole event. I also love how complex the pitches are. They aren't just something where I'm just like, oh, easy, we can just pass a bill and it'll be law. It's like thinking of like what Carrie mentioned, of like instituting a new multilateral organization. Like that is a huge thing to do. And so like just trying to think through these proposals and like trying to figure out like what's feasible and what would be something that would need a little bit more thinking on, I think has been a really fun like intellectual exercise. So I'm enjoying it. I'm excited for the next heat.
All right, and Kaylee, what's your take?
I think building off of Carrie's comment, this past heat, there was definitely a lot of confidence still in U.S. leadership, which I feel like was really in question over the last couple of years. And as we talk about, our competition with Russia and China, I think that's always what we come back to, is what strategic advantages the U.S. have. And I think even for all of the kind of most recent pitches where we were identifying, maybe some weaknesses or areas where the United States needed to work with other countries, all of our contestants were still trying to make arguments for why the U.S. still had, some sort of comparative advantage, unique role to play. So it was really interesting to think about kind of all of the different facets of U.S. power and leadership around the world and within the international community. But I also just echo Tina. I mean, I just basically watching all these, I'm like, man, I hope I get to work with you one day, hopefully on your idea. That would be really cool. So the excitement is just, running large and free.
Thank you to all of our judges for engaging on that question. So we're going to open up another poll question for the audience. As we're thinking about the need for innovation, whether it's in departments or in international alliances, which executive branch agency do you think is most in need of an urgent doubling down on innovation? The Department of State, the Department of Justice, the Department of Homeland Security, or the Department of Defense? And of course, there are so many more agencies that we could think about here. Shai, what are your thoughts here?
Well, I think that it's important to take this question as not being critical of any of these agencies. It's more to look at it in terms of what are we facing in the world right now, and where do we need where do we want to double down and be eager? And I will be a little parochial here, and I will talk about my first home in foreign policy, the U.S. Department of State, which has incredibly innovative people. I think that, as we're looking, and the Department of Defense is amazing, but they're always at the cutting edge. So I'm going to look at the Department of Defense and the Department of State, not because I think they're behind as much as if you look at how important diplomacy is going to be and what we learned from the pandemic in terms of doing virtual diplomacy and the future of hybrid virtual and in-person diplomacy. To me, if I had the checkbook right now, I would go right to the Department of State. I would go right to Secretary Blinken and his team, and I would say, okay, what do you need to push not just diplomacy of the 21st century, but let's start making it for the 22nd century right now. Because if you listen to everything people are talking about today, talking about alliances, you're talking about cooperation in multilateral organizations or through multilateral science cooperation, energy, climate, right? You're going to need your diplomats and your embassies to be able to safely and securely engage at the speed that is needed to make these alliances happen. So for me, love my family at the State Department. And if I were going to double down right now, it would 100% be with them, again, as a way of boosting the great innovative folks who are there and meeting what I think is a really important need when it comes to our diplomacy around the world.
Yeah, I have real bias towards the Department of Defense, but I think of innovation a bit differently. So I think a lot of innovation, and I think this came up with some of our contestants, a lot of thoughts about innovation rely on kind of new organizations standing up to drive innovation within the department, but real cultural change will come when that innovation can happen within existing structures and policies and practices. So Kaylee, what are your thoughts here on this question?
Well, I know Jimmy earlier said he was going to be excited if someone mentioned diversity, equity, inclusion. So I'm going to go there for you, Jimmy. I'm right there with you. So I think that's just another kind of undervalued aspect of innovation is the types of people we even have. If we're talking about cultural change, that has to start with who's even entering the building in the first place. So this gets me out of choosing one of the agencies too. There was no all of them choice for this one, and there are many more. But as we think about our national security and foreign policy workforce, the broadest conceptualizations of it, I think making sure we have personnel that are representative of a variety of subject areas, representative of the American people, I think that's really what's going to really drive innovation moving forward.
Carrie, you've got a background at the Department of Justice and DHS. Do you want to speak to those?
Sure. So it's interesting because I have a different optic for each agency. So for DOJ, that's where I spent the better part of 13 years. And for DHS, that's where a lot of the focus of some of our research work here at CNAS is. So I think about the innovation question a little bit differently for each. For the Department of Justice, I worked there, so I'm going to date myself a little bit because I worked there in the late 90s and the 2000s. Even at that time, I felt that the innovation that was needed was really in the way that the department functioned. Just basic administrative processes felt to me back then like they were probably done pretty similarly as how they had been done in the 80s. And so just in terms of computer systems and administrative functions and the really guts of how the department worked felt very legacy. And so I think there's probably the Department of Justice is so intensely mission focused on the work, and the job of the leadership is so focused on the substance of what the organization is doing, that sometimes these nuts and bolts of how the department did its work were in need of innovation. And even though I've been out for a little while now, I suspect that might still be the case. With DHS, it's a very different story because although some of the components have been around for decades, if not over a century, for some of these, for some of the subcomponents and agencies of the Department of Homeland Security, the headquarters and the department itself is new. And so there, I think about the innovation question more in terms of how the department fulfills its mission. So much of that department's work does rely on technology. Does rely on an ability to innovate in the way that they think about how they do their grant making, because DHS is able to make substantial grants to their state, local, and tribal partners in order to sort of in the service of their mission. So there's a lot of opportunity in the Department of Homeland Security for the leadership to think about how they can innovate in a way that enables them to do their mission. And DHS has such a broad mission in terms of the different things it does, whether it's from emergency management to transportation security to complex law enforcement to, of course, the Immigration and Border Security and more than even that. Cybersecurity, I would be remiss not to mention. So there's so much that is related to innovation that is directly integrated with the mission of those of that component.
Shai, it sounds like we're getting a lot of audience engagement on this question. What are we seeing?
Oh, yeah, we're seeing terrific audience engagement on this. So let me see. Let me go back. There's like so many that I'm like scrolling through the screens here. Okay, so Tucker Jones says, state seems to have the most opportunities for innovation in their mandate. Not a swipe at state as it functions, an endorsement of what they can do if they choose to. I think that Tucker's speaking a little bit to my heart there of what I was saying. Andrew Hanna, one of our contestants, says, I think DHS is probably the one that has the most critical missions that either are related to technology or can be enhanced by it. Cybersecurity, border issues, and the Coast Guard. Carrie, I actually would just love, there's more comments, but I'd love to know your thoughts on that one.
Well, I think that's very in line with what I was starting to get at, which is that number one, because the Department of Homeland Security has such a broad array of activities that they are engaged in. So everywhere from immigration enforcement to border security to cybersecurity to the critical role that the cybersecurity infrastructure security agency, CISA, played in even protecting our elections. And that will be a big part of their mission going forward, making sure that state and locals have the knowledge, the training, the resources, the network to be able to secure their elections at the state and local level. So much of that does involve technological innovation and making sure, because it's a department that really a lot of it is about serving its state and local partners and making sure that they have the money. Then, if we think about the CISA's mission, making sure that their private sector partners, their state and local government partners, that they have the resources, expertise, training, sort of access to information and technologies and knowledge that they might not have at their level. So much of that is tied very closely to the ability of that department to leverage innovative technologies and be able to make them available and to entities or organizations that might not otherwise be able to have access to them.
Very, very cool. Thank you for expanding upon that, and thank you, Andrew, for the comment. Peter says, now this is going to take a little bit of a shot at that other branch of government. I wish this question, I guess, wouldn't only focus on the executive branch, or would only focus on the executive. He wishes that this question was expanded to include Congress. Clearly, to me, Congress is vastly in the need of doubling down on innovative ideas, and so. I don't know if anyone wants to weigh in on our members of the Hill, but that's another angle we didn't necessarily touch specifically touch specifically in our poll. But I think that's a really great point. I think there's all sorts of different moments where people are frustrated with elements of Congress, and I think looking for innovation. I feel like we could have a whole pitch just on, maybe that's a category for next year, Kate. Maybe we should add that to be one of our new categories. If you think that should be a category, mention it in the chat. If you think we should talk about Congress and the legislative process next year in the pitch, drop it in the chat. We also have Beth Ann Saunders, one of our contestants, also said she may be a bit biased in her pitch, but there are so many opportunities to innovate in DoD and a lot of critical issues that need to be addressed. The commercial technology and engagement is there. The DoD needs to leverage it. Dan says Homeland Security gets his vote. James says he agrees with Andrew that DHS has an essential role to play in cybersecurity and infrastructure. And that could just be CISA, but there's also other agencies. So speaking to what Carrie was saying, Colonel Jarvis says state, speaking as an outsider, state has the greatest variety of options available. Wow, the conversation just continues. Tucker Jones comes in and says that USAID is an even better answer. That is a really interesting answer. Again, we only have 4 options that we can fill in. I would have loved to list all of the agencies, but USAID, but USAID is an excellent element of our national security world. The three D, or the many Ds: defense, diplomacy, and development. As the 3 Ds, yes, the 3 Ds, as many of our foreign policy luminaries say. Carrie, you're an expert on Congress. I keep coming back to you. I welcome everybody's thoughts, but do you want to weigh in on Congress at all?
Sure. And yes, I do, because I think it's a really interesting idea that somebody put in the chat there in terms of thinking, we spend a lot of time at CNAS thinking about the role of Congress as a national security institution and writing lots of reports and thinking up lots of new ideas for how Congress can improve its role and its functioning in the national security space. Two things that have been on my mind lately. So one has to do with something that Kaylee mentioned earlier, which is the people question. So there are all sorts of initiatives, including one this week in the House, to be able to compensate staffers more effectively. And although we wouldn't necessarily think of that as an issue, it actually does play into the ability of Congress's role to do its job better, to be able to recruit from more diverse populations. And part of that has to be, does involve having to pay people a decent wage to be able to work in the professional environment in Washington. Another area that I see a lot of opportunity for Congress to innovate on is something that we talked about last week as part of our week one conference and our session that we had with Congresswoman Slotkin and Congressman Meyer, which is the issue of congressional security. That is an issue that we're thinking about here in terms of our domestic security and the ability of Congress to be able to innovate the way that it protects itself, protects its members, and protects its staff members is really an area that is in some need of innovation as well.
Thank you, Carrie. Kate, back to you.
Yeah, so we're preparing for our next session here. We'll have a little intermission from our heats to shift some attention on the next generation mission here at CNAS. The pitch is just one part of how we carry out our mission to invest in the next generation of national security leaders. But there are some other elements that we have. For example, our Sean Brimley Next Gen National Security Leaders Fellowship, which we'll hear a bit more about, our Make Room initiative, which we'll hear a bit more about, and for which we have an event tomorrow. And then a really meaningful opportunity coming up here to see the Vasevich Award presented to 2 CNAS employees. This is an internal award that really focuses on investing and recognizing next generation national security talent within our workforce here at CNAS.
Yeah, the Vasevich is coming up, Kate. Now, we actually have, in addition to 2 being announced today, we actually have 2 Vasevich winners on the screen right now. Both you and Kaylee had the tremendous honor of winning this award. Before we bring up Richard Fontaine, our CEO, who's going to present these awards, which I know are absolutely among the most significant for anyone that is up and coming in the world of national security. Just a couple reflections, like a minute or so of reflections from both of you. Let's start with Kaylee and then with Kate, and then Kate will lead us into Richard. Kaylee, tell us about what the Vasevich meant to you winning it and how excited you are for these new folks.
I am so excited for the presentation of this award to 2 amazing, wonderful individuals today. I'm excited for you all to see and hear a little bit more about them. I think what's so cool about the Vasevich and just taking time to honor, the next generation of national security leaders who I think often are questioning, like, am I doing this right? So it can be really validating and also just a useful guide to see people like Kate, who came before me, and many, many others at CNAS, and the successful kind of role models that they've served as. I think the other thing is, historically, and it's true for this year's winners as well, is these people are just great colleagues. And I think that's what's so great, is valuing people who are not just good at their jobs, but who are always the ones helping everyone else out around the center, going above and beyond, being just great, U.S. citizens, corporate citizens. That dedication and that commitment is just so admirable. And I'm just so excited to see what this year's winners are going to do next.
Yeah, I think it's incredibly moving to work for an organization that invests in their next generation and gives a voice to junior staff. I think it's also really important, and Richard will get into the background of the Vasevich Award itself, but it's really important to work at an organization that recognizes that while we're sitting and thinking through policy decisions, that these have really real impacts on human lives. And the first Vasevich Award winner, for whom our National Security Fellowship is named after, Sean Brimley, he always had a picture of Lieutenant Andrew Vasevich in his office as a reminder of the weight of the decisions that we're thinking through and the recommendations that we're making. And so I think that's a really important thing for us to take with us into anywhere we end up in government or in service to the nation. So with that, do we have Richard teed up and ready to go?
Yeah, thank you. And I think, as everyone can probably tell from the comments that Kaylee and Kate just made, the presentation of the Vasevich Award each year is a very special, very significant part of what we do on an annual basis. The First Lieutenant Andrew Vasevich Jr. Award has been presented at CNAS each year, all the way back to the very founding of the center. We established the award originally in honor of First Lieutenant Vasevich, who was killed in action in Iraq in 2007. He was someone that, through his life and through his service to country and through living his values, really represented the best of America. It exemplified the kind of courage and integrity and commitment to a better world to which all of us aspire. And so each year we take a moment to honor the memory of Lieutenant Vasevich and to recognize extraordinary members of the CNAS team for their leadership, for their values, and for their contributions to U.S. national security. I'd like to once again thank Dr. Andrew Vasevich and his family for allowing CNAS to name this award after your son, so that year after year we're able to bestow this honor on extraordinary young individuals. We couldn't be more grateful for that. This year, there are two such individuals, two recipients of the First Lieutenant Andrew Vasevich Jr. Award, Jasmine Butler and Carissa Nietzsche. Each exemplify many of the qualities and the values that have animated our awardees for well over a decade now. Let me first introduce Jasmine Butler. Jasmine is the events manager at CNAS, where she organizes and plans and executes all center-wide events like this one, like the annual conference that we do each year, and is a member of the external relations team, thinking through the public presentation of our ideas and our people. She's been at CNAS for 6 years, following a position at Marriott. She's a graduate of Bowie State University, where she earned a degree in communications. Jasmine's role over the past 6 years, however, goes well beyond her title and her technical responsibilities. She's a leader at the organization. She's always spurring everyone at CNAS to do their best, to bring their best ideas, their most creative work, their strongest focus. Her periodic pep talks to the staff have become legendary, and she brings to her work the same pride and seriousness of purpose that she expects in all of us. In words and in deed, Jasmine Butler exemplifies the values that we endeavor to live each day at CNAS, and those that are so personified by the life of Lieutenant Vasevich. So congratulations, Jasmine, on this well-deserved award, and let me hand you the floor for a moment.
Thank you so much, Richard. And thank you to my CNAS colleagues, my fellow Vasevich Award winner, Carissa, my boss and mentor, Shai Corman, and especially Dr. Vasevich and the entire Vasevich family for this incredible honor. I have to be honest, before working at CNAS, I had no idea what a think tank was. But now, 6 years later, I cannot imagine my career or my life without this organization. I was born in Washington, D.C., raised in Maryland, and thanks to the sacrifices of my parents, Jeanette and Colin, I was one of the first college graduates in my family, certainly not the last. But the conversation at the dinner table typically focused on what was happening in our neighborhood. It was hard to even fathom having the power to resolve issues on a national level when it sometimes felt like your voice wasn't heard in your community. Today, the conversation is a little different. I have the honor of working with brilliant colleagues who are innovative thought leaders in this space and who show me every single day the power of their influence. I'm so grateful to CNAS, which recognizes the strength of diverse voices at the table and understands the tremendous work that still needs to be done so that people like me are no longer the only or the first. And so that we won't continue to see unfortunate events like we've seen over the past year. Andrew Vasevich, who made the ultimate sacrifice, is a constant reminder that we have to not only have vision, but bravery and courage to do whatever it takes for the betterment of this country. I proudly accept this award, and whether I'm shaking hands with world leaders or teaching interns how to execute events, I will do it with honor and thoughtfulness. And I challenge all of us to continue our work with people in mind, understanding the conversations that we have affect real people, real families, and real futures. Thank you.
Thanks, Jasmine. That was fantastic. And congratulations again. And now let me introduce the second of our two award winners, Carissa Nietzsche. Carissa is an associate fellow in CNAS's Transatlantic Security Program, where she focuses on European security, on China's role in Europe, and on threats to democracy in Europe. She previously worked with the Brookings Institution and the Wilson Center. She's a graduate of both UT Austin and also received a master's degree from Georgetown University School of Foreign Service. In her time at CNAS, Carissa has published widely. She's run projects. She's developed new policy ideas and a lot more besides. And through it all, she demonstrates the kind of leadership and vision intrinsic to Vasevich awardees. She's a rising star in the national security field and in the field of transatlantic relations with a deep commitment to public service. Her future contributions are going to be vast. And so if this is the first time you've heard of Carissa Nietzsche, I can guarantee that it won't be the last. Carissa, congratulations on this well-deserved award. And let me hand you the floor for a moment.
Thank you so much, Richard. And Jasmine, you're an incredibly tough act to follow, as always. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Dr. Vasevich and the Vasevich family for entrusting me with this award. To my CNAS colleagues, what a great privilege it is to call each of you a colleague and to learn from you every day. To my boss and mentor, Andrea Kendall-Taylor, thank you for helping me find my voice. And to the former Vasevich Award winners, I will try my best to fill your incredibly large shoes. When you first hear about CNAS, it's one of those places that sounds a little too good to be true, especially when you're a junior staffer. What makes CNAS so special is that it is not only a place that makes room at the table for the next generation, but it gives members of the next generation a voice. During one of my first CNAS staff meetings, the conversation quickly turned to the latest global developments. Richard did not turn to the most senior members of our staff, but instead to a junior staffer for their analysis and take on the situation. My first thought was, well, no one is safe. But my second was, wow, they actually care what we think. In a city with denizens too often dazzled by credentials, titles, and formers, CNAS is looking to the next generation. The spirit of futures, not formers, is a guiding principle of the institution, an institution that understands that the next generation will be left with some of the world's most pressing challenges. The past few years have shown us that U.S. foreign policy rests on a series of long-standing assumptions, and its value is often not communicated to the American people. It's up to our generation to question those assumptions and to better connect decisions made in Washington with Main Street. During this next year and throughout my career, I will strive to live up to the spirit of this award and to pull up a seat for the generation of national security practitioners following mine. All the while, though, we all must remember to save a seat for those who came before us and who embody the very best of the national security field. Lieutenant Andrew J. Vasevich Jr. and the inaugural holder of this award, Sean Brimley. Their legacies live on, and the national security field is all the better for it. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Carissa. Congratulations to you. Congratulations to Jasmine, and for your fantastic remarks. You know, Jasmine, you should not feel bad at all about not knowing what a think tank was a few years ago, because I've worked for one for quite a while and my family still doesn't know what a think tank is. You know, and that's basically everybody. You guys have done fantastic work at CNAS. We're thrilled to be colleagues with you, and now it's going to be your job to start mentoring the next generation yourself. So congratulations. With that, let us go back to our fierce Shark Tank-like competition that we interrupted for this special moment that we look forward to so much each year. And I'm going to turn it back over to our host, and as we have said before, former Vasevich winner, Kate Kuzminski. She's going to introduce the Heat 3 contestants. And Jasmine and Carissa, don't get too comfortable because we're going to have you back next year as part of the pitch, if nothing else. So congratulations again, and back over to you, Kate.
Thanks so much. And again, tough act to follow. So congratulations to our two Vasevich Award winners, Jasmine and Carissa, two leaders in national security, but even more importantly, two wonderful human beings. So now we will enter into Heat 3 of the pitch. A reminder to our audience that any views expressed over the course of their remarks do not reflect their employers and do not reflect CNAS. So we'll bring up our first contestant here, Jake Brooks. So Jake's pitch is Diplomacy for Global Health Security, Why the Foreign Service Needs a Public Health Officers Corps.
All right, Jake, and can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear.
Okay, great. And I understand you're going to do a quick disclaimer before you get started, and then we'll begin your time. Is that right?
Yes.
All right, hit us with that disclaimer, and then I'll tell you when to start.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jake Brook. I do just want to note that the views expressed right now in my pitch do not reflect the views of the Department of State or the U.S. Army. Thank you.
All right. And with that, your time begins now.
More than 600,000 deaths, nearly 20 million jobs lost, and up to 5 trillion in losses from the COVID-19 pandemic tragically illustrate just how neglected global health is as a U.S. foreign policy priority. The lack of dedicated personnel within the State Department to address global health diplomacy leaves the U.S. vulnerable to future pandemics. To address this critical information gap and better coordinate global health initiatives, the Department of State should establish a new Public Health Officers Cone. Public health officers would be responsible for policy formulation and diplomatic engagement, but would not replace Department of Health and Human Services health attachés or USAID officers. Instead, an expanded Corps of Health attachés should serve in a support role to provide technical advice as scientific experts. Likewise, responsibility for development assistance related to public health should continue to fall under USAID. In doing so, this would establish a clear delineation of responsibilities between each agency, allowing each to complement the other's strengths, while preventing interagency turf war that could seriously undermine national security. At the entry level, a public health officer can meet with in-country health and environmental ministry contacts, visit and report on local hospitals and clinics, and meet with civil society actors to discuss local health challenges. Mid-level officers could work with their host country counterparts to negotiate research and information sharing agreements. Senior level officers could advise policymakers in the NSC on drafting and implementing biosecurity strategy. A public health cone would enable the U.S. to collect needed information on global health security concerns and raise early alarm to contain disease outbreaks before they become a threat to the United States. Disease control has become one of the foremost challenges of the 21st century. Establishing a public health cone within the Foreign Service would empower America's diplomats to confront global health challenges and enhance American leadership to combat the coronavirus and future disease threats.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Next up, we have contestant 2, Jamil Brown. His pitch is National Security Leaders for Diverse Challenges.
Hey, Jamil, just checking your sound. Can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Excellent. And I believe you've got a disclaimer as well before we get started.
I do, yes. So everyone, my name is Jamil Brown. My views do not reflect the thoughts or opinions of the Department of Defense or the U.S. Air Force Academy.
All right. And with that, your time begins now.
Fantastic. As a political science instructor and citizen of the U.S., I am growing increasingly concerned about the ability of national security decision makers and institutions to tackle emerging national security challenges. This concern is most evident by protracted conflicts, the prevalence of misinformation, and the pace at which near-peer competitors are moving ahead in the areas of artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, and spaceflight, just to name a few. Unfortunately, the national security apparatus has responded to these growing concerns by generically introducing STEM-focused or STEM-only solutions. The reality, however, is the solutions are more broad and much more interdisciplinary. I am suggesting the creation of a national security consortium of government organizations, academic institutions, and think tanks that facilitate a national security literacy program. This program highlights specific skills, rather than degrees, that are viewed as most relevant to tackling emerging national security challenges. This consortium also provides opportunities to pursue these skills. This idea is similar to approaches taken in other industries. For example, communities like the finance industry and engineering community, and even the K-12 education industry identify specific skills or certifications that are suggested for advancement. National security professionals can benefit from being exposed to everything from STEM to history, art, and political science. By taking this approach, we are making a more inclusive national security enterprise by focusing on skill rather than academic pedigree. This approach also means a wider array of academic disciplines, ethnicities, experiences, genders, economic statuses, and even sexual orientations, in essence, encouraging diversity of thought to tackle the diverse set of emerging national security challenges. With this mindset, we will be walking in the footsteps of national security innovators like Henry Kissinger, Wernher von Braun, Madeleine Albright, Albert Einstein, and even Arnold Schwarzenegger. These great leaders who, despite being immigrants, found innovative ways to affect change and lead this country to greatness.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jamil. Next up, we have contestant number 3, John Grover. John's pitch is how to take the Space Force seriously.
All right. John, just want to check your sound. Can you hear us all right?
I can hear you.
Excellent. And you also are going to share a disclaimer with us before you get started, so hit us with that.
Okay. My name is John Grover. The views that I'm presenting here do not reflect the opinions of the U.S. Department of the Treasury or the U.S. government.
Thank you, John. Your time begins now.
Do you take the Space Force seriously? Do you have confidence in it? Consider, for instance, a nuclear attack, a terrifying prospect. In January of 2018, residents of Hawaii woke up to a warning that North Korea had sent a nuclear missile. Thankfully, this was a false alarm. But what if it had been real? The Space Force operates satellites to detect such launches. Satellites are pretty amazing. You use them all the time when you use your cell phone. Consider GPS for navigation, worth over $1 trillion to the US economy. Space Force has a pretty important mission, but do Americans actually know about it? Do they have confidence in the Space Force? 61% of Americans support the idea of a Space Force. But how do we fix this disconnect? I propose an educational program. It would be a yearly thing where you get 1 to 2 dozen people. They would meet once a week for 1 to 2 months. Consider the format we have now. Virtual, low cost, very easy to get started. You could have officers here from the Space Force who could answer pressing, difficult questions from the audience, members of the media, legislative staffers who could use this in their work, academic experts, and imagine how the Space Force could use this in their own legislative and public affairs to build confidence in their institution and to refine their mission set. They could do this basically with, working with a think tank. They could do this on their own. They could use it with a university. Either way, this is a low cost, high opportunity that they could use. And I think that this is a wonderful idea for the Space Force. We should take it seriously and we should invest in them through this program.
Thanks so much, John. And last but certainly not least, our final contestant for the day is Sarah Plana. Sarah's pitch is prioritizing escalation risk in U.S. military training.
Hey, Sarah, can you hear me all right?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, which means your time begins now.
In fall 2016, a remote corner of northwest Syria became a tinderbox. Turkish forces rolled in from the north, while Syrian, Russian, and Iranian forces supported by airstrikes advanced from the south. Caught in the middle were American Green Berets advising counter-ISIS Syrian fighters. After months of tension, Russian airstrikes mistakenly hit Syrian Kurdish positions not far from their American advisors, whose decision not to shoot down the Russian aircraft averted a crisis between nuclear-armed nations. This episode shows how American military personnel are often thrust into volatile situations and asked to make quick decisions that could provoke greater conflict. But warfighters are offered too little guidance for how to navigate escalation risks. The Defense Department should make a central aim of U.S. military training to empower warfighters at all ranks to recognize when their decisions in peacetime, crisis, and across a spectrum of competition alike might trigger escalation and how to avoid it. Military commanders already think in terms of risk to forces, risk to mission, risk to strategy. Let's add another crucial one, escalation risk. Individual training and professional military education should convey frameworks for how to identify escalation risk and set escalation guidance in commander's intent and rules of engagement. Each service should develop indicators of escalation for each mission set and integrate them into tactical manuals to prepare personnel if they have to make decisions while cut off from command. It should become second nature for service members to ask themselves a key question before taking any action. How might my action be perceived or misperceived by the enemy? Training exercises should also include scenarios of escalation and let warfighters practice steps to mitigate it. In moments when the mission is as much not to escalate a conflict as to win it, American warfighters deserve to have the tools they need to succeed in both.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sarah. So again, we'll bring back our judges to ask specific questions from each of our contestants. So first, we'll bring back Jake and Jimmy. Please ask your question.
All right. Jake, okay, you're up. All right, so first, thank you. This was really informative, and talking about global health diplomacy and sort of building up this core that can serve as a quick reaction force, build up relationships abroad, right? This is very interesting. What level of coordination would occur? So I think of this global health core. What level of coordination would happen with foreign service first, and then also the level of coordination with peace, like UN peacekeeping forces? Like, where do they fit in the realm? And I know it's a broad question, but I'm just trying to figure out where they plug in at.
Well, thank you. No, that's a good question. So first, I do think internally within the structure of the Department of State, you do need to create a consolidated Bureau of Global Health, similar to most other policy bureaus, that is the central point for all global health and public health related diplomacy. Right now, we do have an Office of Global Health. We also do have the Office of Global Coordination related to HIV/AIDS, and we do have a COVID-19 task force, but this is really quite disparate. So having a centralized bureau is the first probably step that's needed, in addition to creating this distinct public health officers corps. I also would note that within that corps, there should be a degree of independence related from the rest of the embassy, similar to the way a counselor section is separate from a political section, and neither can interfere with the other. This actually ensures a great deal of autonomy in their diplomatic engagements, and I think helps build further trust. I also think within this distinct bureau that needs to be created, obviously different offices need to be created for, say, multilateral engagement, and particular engagement with the United Nations and the WHO especially, is where that's really going to have to come into play.
Thank you, Jake.
All right, great. Now we'll bring back Jamil and Tina. Please ask your question.
Great. Hi, Jamil. Thank you so much for your pitch. I am a huge proponent of interdisciplinary education, and also agree with you that we're at a pivotal moment where we need to start focusing on skills rather than pedigree. So my question for you is if you could elaborate a bit more on the specific skills that the students of the National Security Literacy Program would gain.
Yes, fantastic. Thank you, by the way, for your question. So I think that it's important to remember that the challenges are always evolving, right? And so organizations like the Department of Defense and even the Department of State put out and publish, long-term strategies. And so by simply looking at these strategies, we can identify, okay, what types of skills can best tackle some of the concerns or threats identified in some of those documents. So for example, for the Department of Defense, we have the National Defense Strategy, right? Well, let's look at that document and see, hey, what types of concerns are there? Are there concerns that maybe kind of pivot us more towards talking about, hypersonics and, some more engineering related things? Well, that's great. We should have some, focus there, but we should also focus then on the policy that's associated with those types of conversations. And then we can't forget, right, that in any type of environment, you need to have somebody to tell the story. And so it's important to make sure that at the core of any of this, you have some type of communication skill, whether that be writing or speaking, that can help facilitate, the concerns and the solutions associated with them.
Great. Thank you so much for that.
All right. Now we'll have John return, and Kaylee, please ask your question.
John, thank you so much for your presentation and for not suggesting a TV show. But you opened kind of with an example that talked about public trust in the Space Force, and then your solution targeted, media, think tank experts, academic experts, policymakers. I was curious how you saw the link between kind of the sessions that you're suggesting the Space Force holds and that public trust component.
So I'm thinking of this as a stakeholder approach, that these are players, especially, of course, in the policymaking circles in DC, who have an outsized impact. That's what I'm thinking about, reporters in the media. But I also think if you did this virtually, again, as we're doing now, there's no reason why you can't have reporters, academics, folks from across the country. I mean, I wouldn't mind even having a certain civilian component. Part of that could be industry leaders, but why not have some civilians who are interested in this take part and be able to ask some questions? I think that could really shore up the trust. And there's other options as well in this. They could publicize their wins. I don't think they should overclassify some of their stuff. But that's the idea, is that you have this give and take that wouldn't exist otherwise.
All right. And now for our final contestant question of the day, we'll bring back Sarah and Carrie. Please ask your question.
Great, thanks so much. And Sarah, thank you for your presentation. I'm wondering if you can just drill down a little bit. So I appreciate your idea about trying to improve the training of military personnel to be able to better evaluate the risk of escalation. But can you talk more about how that would intersect with the proper functioning of the chain of command? So I think I was with you, and then by the end of the presentation, I was starting to think, well, this sounds like there could be a risk of basically second guessing in the field. How can you articulate more and explain to our viewers how what you're proposing is not advocating, for basically everybody at different levels out in the field to be second guessing what the command is?
Sure. Thank you so much for your question. So the idea would be to just be very deliberate about understanding escalation risk at all levels of the chain of command. And so you would imagine that when there are tactical deployments, those military personnel need to be empowered to understand what exactly the guidelines are from their chain of command about when to escalate and when not to escalate, and what sorts of triggers that they will encounter in their tactical deployment might actually lead to greater conflict, and how to act in accordance with mission and within acceptable costs. And so the idea would be to integrate and impart a value of escalation avoidance, and at least calculating escalation risk at each level of the chain of command, so that when the rubber meets the road, when our military personnel are out there in the field, they can act in accordance with what everyone across the chain of command actually desires for a particular mission.
Great. Thanks for that explanation.
Sure.
Wonderful. Well, thank you to all of our contestants from today. I'll give you a little sense of what happens next. So right now, our judges are submitting their rankings for the final heats. And at this point, all of the heats will have been voted on by our judges. But now is a reminder that you get to participate as well. So while our judges submit their final rankings, we want you to vote for your favorite person from today. The poll for the People's Choice Award is now open. To vote, go to cnas.org/vote. You may only vote once, but now that you've been participating in the polls throughout today's event, this question is a little different. So remember to go to cnas.org/vote. You'll be voting out of all 12 contestants from today. So please head over there to propose your vote for the People's Choice Award.
That's right. And it's thank you to Jarrell Clay, by the way, from our production team, who did an awesome job putting together the special voting page for the People's Choice. We wanted to give that one a little bit of extra flair today. And thank you. Wow, weren't all of those terrific, Kate? I mean, it was really, really, really wonderful to hear so many innovative ideas and so many great speakers. I was just riveted throughout. So this has been a real special day. Not to mention, by the way, our two Vasevich Award winners who, gave a clinic on good public speaking with their acceptance speeches. So it's been a good day.
I think it gives a lot of hope for the future. So Shai, we've been talking a lot about substance today, but you come at national security from you have a lot of technical expertise to provide. And as you mentioned, a lot of our speakers today did an excellent job in presenting their ideas, not just formulating their ideas. But can you talk a little bit about your, first of all, what role do you see communications playing in the national security field?
So thanks for asking, Kate. And while our judges are hard at work doing their scoring, I'm happy to expand a little bit. I have a great joy of, I've been working in national security communications, for almost 2 decades. And I've really come to believe, and I've worked with so many great mentors who have showed me how national security communications is such a fundamental part of our national security work. Because when you're a democracy and when you have such a big footprint in the world, being able to explain what you're doing, why you're doing it, what your strategy is, being as transparent as you can about the moves that you are making as a global superpower are absolutely critical. And so when we think about bringing up the next generation of leaders, I'm always applying the lens of, let's make sure every single one of these people is also a great national security communicator. Let's not wait until they are at the assistant secretary level getting ready for their confirmation hearing to have had their first media training or prep session. And that's why actually at CNAS, we spend a lot of time with folks at every level of the staff, making sure they have the skills and the confidence to go out and be on camera or talking to journalists who ask tough questions, really important, tough questions. And tip my hat to all the journalists. And we had a few great ones as part of the conference over the last couple of weeks. And Dave Lawler and Brian Walsh and of course Jonathan Swan, who from Axios, who were panelists and asked really tough questions. And those questions are so critical because they test our ideas that are being conceived a little bit away from the public, but then they really have to meet the public and meet that criticism in order to really meet the test. So I think having national security communicators, as I fumble over those words, is critical for our country.
And you spend a lot of time, our audience may not know this, but training us up in how best to interact with the media, with policymakers, with Congress. So I think there's a lot of interest in our audience of how do you go about actually being a good national security communicator? What are some tips or pieces of advice that you give to us at CNAS that you would want to share with the audience?
Well, I think I think one of the most important things is the why, and we've heard this talked about earlier, but explaining what the significance is, what is the motivation, what is the goal, and being transparent about that goal. You know, the American people, journalists, like, they're smart, and they're going to want to hear why we are doing it. And even if you can't convince someone, being transparent about it is really, really important. So that's one very important piece. I think another important piece is absolutely respecting our independent media. You know, journalists play such a critical role, and journalist freedom is such an important thing around the world. That is part of how we keep governments honest. That's how we keep American citizens safe overseas when there are people reporting on crises. So I think that's a really important element. I think I want to give a shout out to again, going back to the State Department crew, but things like the State Department Daily Press Briefing, the White House Press Briefing, the Department of Defense Press Briefing, those spokespeople, when they go to the podium, they are making themselves available to that public test on what they're doing and why. And I think you have to embrace that, and you have to be prepared for that, and do your homework, and really respect that, because it's bigger than just answering questions. It's really about being accountable. And I think if you embrace those as a national security communicator, you're going to do great. That's the big picture philosophical side. On the technical side, I would just say, especially in this Zoom world, there's 3 tips I have, and you could be a national security communicator or anyone. And one of them is, make sure to look in the camera, right? Like right now, Kate and the judges, right? We're having a moment because I'm looking in the camera and I'm riled up and I'm super excited. That's also really important. Make sure that your sound is pretty good, and that you have a good sense of your voice. I'm a loud talker. If you're in my house and I'm on the cell phone, you basically can't have a conversation because I'm so loud. So I really try to control myself when I'm talking into a microphone. And then last but not least, this is a personal one, but as you can see, I love moving my hands. I kind of move around a little bit. I think it's okay, as long as you're not being distracting, to have that natural movement. And I think that not being afraid to be yourself, especially when you're on camera, is critical to being effective, particularly in the virtual space. So that's my riff on being a national security communicator, especially right now, these days.
In the era of Zoom.
In the era of Zoom.
So early on, I'm going to turn this question over to the judges. Early on in our conversation, we asked you, what are you looking for? But now that we've seen all of our contestants, you certainly don't have to give away your answers with respect to who you're voting for. But what are some of the skills that you saw displayed among the contestants today that really stood out to you? I'll go to Tina. Tina, what have you seen today?
I think first off, the enthusiasm that we saw from the contestants. I mean, if you're not delivering with enthusiasm, it's hard to get as into the topic. Like you could be describing paint drying, but if you're just delivering it like your life depended on it, like I will listen to you. I also think the conciseness that the pitchers had today was great. I mean, they had a 2-minute parameter, but being able to distill complex problems and also propose a solution and how to implement it, that's a really, really useful skill to have, especially when time is a valuable commodity for policymakers and those in the national security space.
Jimmy, what were some of your observations?
So my background was an intelligence briefer at one point in my career, and it's tough. It's tough to get up there, put out an idea, let people ask you questions. It's challenged. So I really the confidence piece I think was very strong here. I think there was also an element of most of the time you hear folks who say they give you ideas and they give you more ideas. They give you more ideas. They were able to give you an idea and then say, here are the 3 points to support what I'm talking talking about. And then also, this is why it matters. This is why it matters globally. This is why it matters on the domestic front. And so I found a lot of that in across all the presentations today. So it definitely inspired me for today to brush up on my briefing skills.
That's great. Yeah, that really inspired me and called me to task for my own communication style moving forward, because the next generation is rising. Kaylee, what were some of your observations?
Yeah, I think I saw some of our competitors use one of my favorite kind of structures or way to kind of help effectively communicate a message, and that is signposting. So really, let's not make this a guessing game. Tell your audience exactly what they're going to hear. So I heard many of our communicators go, well, I'm going to talk about the who, the what, and the why. And then they would talk about the who, the what, and the why. And especially when you're dumping a lot of information into 2 minutes. And as a judge, I was appreciative of this, clearly took us through in a very logical manner of what they were going to be talking about. So I didn't have to go, oh, wait, have we moved on to a different section yet? Or what's coming next? I wasn't on the edge of my seat in that kind of anxiety-driven regard, but more could be so fully present with them as they were kind of engaging on these topics.
That's great. And Carrie, what were your observations?
Thanks, Kate. What I felt made the most compelling presentations were the individuals who really articulated what problem it was that they were trying to solve. So in other words, if I found myself thinking throughout the presentation, well, how does it work now? Is that really, different than from how that whatever particular government agency they were talking about, is it that different from how they work now? So I think the presentations that were the most compelling and the most persuasive were the ones that were able to really be precise about, here's the thing that's not working, and here's how my idea would solve it. Those are the ones that I was the most enthusiastic about.
Yeah, that's good feedback. A critique that you frequently get from policymakers and legislators alike is, what problem is your solution trying to solve? Or is this a solution in search of a problem? So really articulating that problem statement up front goes a long way in briefing people of import. So thanks to Shai for those excellent tips, and thank you for the observations among our judges. We're going to shift into a slightly different part of our conversation, as our VIP judges are currently judging on our Best in Show. So as you've seen through the pitch and through the Vasevich presentation, at CNAS, a key part of our mission is to inform and prepare the national security leaders, not just of today, but also of tomorrow. In keeping with that mission, CNAS sponsors several programs that educate and advance the next generation of national security experts. The pitch is just one of these efforts. Earlier, as I said, you saw the Vasevich presentation, but we have a few other programs that may be of interest to our audience. We'd like to introduce you to two of those programs. The first is called Make Room, the Make Room Initiative, which is an inclusive, multifaceted community where the inherent value of all people is recognized and celebrated, and where those who are traditionally underrepresented in the national security field are empowered and equipped with skills to pursue and develop their professional goals and leadership. Make Room's co-founder will be discussing this program in just a minute, and it'll be a familiar face. And then we also will brief you on the Sean Brimley Next Generation National Security Leaders Program. The Next Gen program is a year-long part-time professional development fellowship that aims to bring together young professionals across different sectors in the national security field to learn best practices and lessons in leadership, and to build relationships that will last over the course of their career. So we'll speak further about that program in just a bit. But first, we'll welcome back one of our expert judges and previous Vasevich Award winner, Kaylee Thomas. Kaylee is an associate fellow in our Middle East Security Program, and she is the co-founder of the Make Room Initiative. So Kaylee, welcome back, and we'd love to hear more about the Make Room Initiative.
Well, I would love to talk about it, Kate. So I'm super excited that you guys are lending me a couple minutes during this wonderful event to talk about Make Room. You gave an overview, but I think one of the main goals of Make Room really when we were creating it, and this is, part of the ethos of CNAS too, is how can we lower the barriers to access to information, skills, networks, so that we can make sure that we have a diverse and talented national security workforce. As we talk about all of the different challenges that the US is facing today over the course of this event, I think having that diverse and talented workforce is going to be so important. So we do this, through some regular programming, which includes a monthly newsletter featuring diverse voices and calling attention to all kinds of research happening across the space from emerging leaders in this field. And then also a study series with interactive sessions that focuses on functional skills development as well as substantive learning. So we cover topics like how to write an op-ed, how to speak to the media. We did a public speaking training that was closely tied to this event. And then also, some of those more niche national security subject matters like financial technology and national security, or how to really understand the role that sanctions play in foreign policy. I know that I've already learned so much participating in our programming, and I really am excited the most because I have the privilege to announce a new effort today. We are launching an online mentoring network. And this network really aims to level the playing field when it comes to mentorship. So rather than pair a single mentor with a single mentee, as many traditional programs do, the online network allows mentees to solicit specific kinds of support, from informational interviews to op-ed writing guidance to salary negotiation advice provided by volunteer mentors in the community through direct engagement. I've been calling it a la carte mentoring. It's all part of an effort to really democratize mentorship. It can be, such a precious element of a successful career in national security, but so many people, especially from underrepresented communities, come to DC or are trying to get DC and don't have access to those networks yet. So we're trying to make a really equitable, inclusive space. You can learn more about the network, see frequently asked questions and their answers on our website, as well as find the link to join. To all of you who are watching and listening today, thank you. If you're watching this, consider this your personal invitation to join, either as a mentor or a mentee. I look forward to seeing you on the network and hopefully welcoming you to the Make Room community.
That's great. Thank you so much, Kaylee, for that presentation and overview of the Make Room initiative. And what a great program it is. To our audience, remember that you can get involved in that initiative by subscribing to the Make Room newsletter or joining the study series. Another reminder that our People's Choice Award vote is still open. So please get in and submit your vote for the People's Choice Award as we enter into our next segment. We'll next be covering our the Sean Brimley National Security Leaders Program, and we'll be joined here by Katie Galgano, who serves as the Executive Research Assistant at CNAS and supports the director of the Sean Brimley Next Generation National Security Leaders Program. Welcome to the show, Katie.
Thanks, Kate. I'm really excited to be here. I'm a big fan of the pitch, so I'm very excited I get to be on it this year. As Kate said, I'm Katie Galgano, and I'm the Executive Research Assistant at CNAS, and I support the director of the Sean Brimley Next Generation National Security Leaders Fellowship. And that's what I'm here to talk to you about just a little bit. In 2018, the year-long part-time fellowship was named in honor of Sean Brimley. And you heard Kate speak about Sean a little bit earlier today. Sean was a founding member of CNAS, and he made incredible contributions both to the center and to the national security community in general. He was the inaugural recipient of the Vasevich Award, which you got to see presented earlier today. And in both his personal and professional capacity, Sean really exemplified the ideals of the Next Gen program. So we're really honored to have our fellowship named after him. As I mentioned before, this is a year-long part-time professional development fellowship. Applications open each fall, and the new cohort is announced every January. Fellows are between the ages of 27 and 35. Each cohort brings together a bipartisan group of professionals from across sectors within the national security field. Our fellows and alumni work on everything from guns and tanks to germs, from diplomacy to water security and everything in between. We're really proud that our fellows come from such a diverse range of sectors. The program works to build fellows' leadership abilities. We do this through a number of ways, but two of the most notable are the dinner series and the study tour. So starting with the monthly dinner series, our co-chairs, Michelle Flournoy and Robert Rangel, moderate a Q&A with the fellows who get to ask prominent leaders in the field questions about their careers and lessons that they've learned. Some of our past speakers have included former Secretary of State Madeleine Albright, Admiral Cecil Haney, Congressmembers Mike Gallagher and Alyssa Slotkin, Eric Schmidt, and Ambassador Bonnie Jenkins. And as you can tell from this list, we really try to get a wide variety of perspectives from our speakers. The other portion is a week-long international study tour where fellows meet with experts and leaders and learn about a specific area of national security, but they do so from the point of view of a partner of the United States. In the past, our fellows have traveled to Israel, Taiwan, and South Korea. It's an amazing program, and each year our fellows are truly an outstanding bunch, and it's so much fun getting to work with them and watch them grow throughout the year and beyond. And with that, I'll turn it back to you, Kate and Shai. Thanks again for having me on.
Yeah, thank you both for providing us with an overview of ways that people can get involved with CNAS from their capacity wherever they're working. We really appreciate the time that you took. All right, so we're now in the final countdown for all of our votes. Shai, how are you feeling?
I am on mute. I'm so excited I had to restrain myself with the mute button. I'm thrilled. I'm hearing we've had hundreds and hundreds of votes for the People's Choice. And I know that our VIP judges are tabulating right now and evaluating. And I think, one thing that's been really cool is, and it's a great thing about working at CNAS, is that it seems that everyone is always doing something, like is always playing a role behind the scenes, in front of the scenes. And I thought it might be a great moment for us while we wait for our VIP judges. And we wait for the results of the People's Choice, because the People's Choice is actually closed or closing right now. So hopefully people voted. A great time to say thank you, because I think some of the folks you've seen, like Katie Galgano, for example, yes, she's representing the Next Gen Fellowship, the Brimley Next Gen Fellowship, but she's also one of the people that's been integral to be part of the production team today. So I want to just give a moment of shout out to the people on our production team who have been working day and night, honestly, for months. Since last year's pitch finished, we started working on this year. So we've got Jarrell Clay, who's been doing tons of technical things in the background and in the foreground at any given moment. Natalie Grogan, who's working with all of our candidates, along with Carissa Nietzsche, who you saw earlier as a Vasevich winner, also been working with our candidates in recruiting and bringing them to the stage today. Anna Peterson from the comms team, working on all of our digital promotion. If you just got an email in your inbox saying that the mentoring network is open and it's time to register, Anna's the one who hits play, who presses play on that button, among a lot of other things. Danya Torres, also integral part of our comms team. And last but not least, you saw her earlier. She spoke so beautifully, our Vasevich Award winner, another Vasevich Award winner, the amazing Jasmine Butler, who is just an incredible colleague. And then, of course, there's our wonderful judges, Jimmy, Carrie, Tina, and Kaylee. They've been fantastic. Our CEO, Richard Fontaine, who continues to support this awesome endeavor and all the other things you're hearing about, which is great. And then we're coming up to our VIP judges, who I can't wait to thank and hear their impressions, but I don't know if we're ready to do that yet. Waiting for the word from backstage. I have this extra microphone going on in my ear. Kate, how about you? How are you feeling about today? This is your first hosting of a pitch.
That's right. That's right.
How'd that go?
I think it was an excellent event. It's great. It really is great to see the talent that's coming up behind you and I, Shai. So keeps us on our game as we move forward. And then also, as you mentioned, all the behind the scenes partners that we have at CNAS. I think one of the biggest pieces of advice I can give for anyone who wants a career in DC is that it's the people behind the scenes who make everything happen, from Hill staffers and DoD staffers and junior officers in uniform to the comms team at any organization across town. That's what makes the world run. And so it's great to hear the work of others recognized, especially those who don't always get to be in front of the camera like you or I might be. It really is a crucial part of what makes DC run.
Okay, well, it looks like our VIP judges are making their way. It also looks like we should soon be getting the People's Choice results, and I believe it's almost time to release them.
All right.
We've got. I know we've got our VIP judges getting ready backstage. We will be announcing the People's Choice winner momentarily, and the results are in fact in.
All right.
Kate, are you? I feel like you should do the honors. You should do the honors. Our host has to do the honors.
And then we'll bring up our People's Choice Award winner to make a little statement. All right. So with more than 500 votes, the top choice is Sarah Plana, prioritizing escalation risk in U.S. military training.
And that's more than 500 votes total. Sarah won out of those 500, got the most, just to be clear.
Got it. Got it.
We always want to be factually correct and do our research.
That's right.
But
data matter.
Congratulations to Sarah Plana. We're going to bring Sarah up in a moment. Sarah, congratulations, winner of the People's Choice.
Thank you, everybody. I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who gave feedback, who voted, obviously, and who gave feedback to the pitch. And all of the researchers and scholars who are working on escalation risks, especially. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Sarah. We are ready to bring up our VIP judges. I see them backstage. Kate, take it away. Thank you, Sarah.
All right. So now we'd like to introduce our esteemed VIP judges, Michelle Flournoy and Mike Zach. Michelle Flournoy is the co-founder and managing partner of West Exec Advisors. She previously served as the Undersecretary of Defense for Policy from February 2009 until 2012. She's also the co-founder and chair of the board of directors here at CNAS and the co-chair of the Sean Brimley National Security Next Generation Leaders Fellowship at CNAS. Welcome, Michelle.
It's great to be here. This is my favorite event of the year.
And we're so glad for you to participate. We're also joined by Mike Zach, who spent 33 years as a high technology entrepreneur and venture capitalist. He's a partner emeritus at CRV. And prior to joining CRV, Mike was a co-founder of a successful internet equipment company, very invested in the future of technology and backed by venture capital. Mike's a member of our CNAS board of directors, and welcome aboard.
It's a delight to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. So the two of you have some of the best honors of not just the day, but of our annual security conference writ large. You get to bestow this award on the winners of our individual heats, and then also for the best in show. What were some of the things that you saw in the presentations today that really stuck out to you? Michelle, we'll start with you.
Just a really tough choice. I mean, honestly, I think I was so impressed with all of the heat winners and all of the heats. Some really original ideas going at the challenges that are most significant, most consequential for the U.S. At this moment in time, and just some really, really creative solutions. And a couple things, certainly a few things that I've never thought of. So it just it goes to show you bringing bringing in next generation voices can add a lot of value to the discussion.
That's right. All right. And Mike, what were some of the things that you saw today that really stood out to you?
The first thing that stood out for me was how humbling an experience it was. These are sharp minds that we just had the privilege of listening to, well-organized, incisive, I think in general, and I guess entirely across the board, the value propositions of their proposals were clear and compelling.
That's great. Well, so here's how we'll proceed. Mike is going to announce our winners for each heat. After he announces the winners, they'll give feedback to our contestants who won. And then following that, Michelle will let us know who won Best in Show. So Mike, I'm going to turn it over to you to announce our Heat 1 winner.
Well, I guess this is the point where the drum roll comes in. But the Heat 1 winner was Beth Ann Saunders.
Thank you so much. I am so honored and excited.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to Heat 2.
Sure. The Heat 2 winner was Abigail Wolf.
Hi, thank you so much.
Congratulations, Abigail.
All right, and lastly, Heat 3.
And Heat 3 was Jake Brook.
Hi, thank you so much.
Congratulations.
Any feedback that you, Michelle, and Mike would like to give to the winners of our 3 heats?
Well, if I could start, I would just say that, each of you chose a topic that is really front and center for American security, whether it's the issue of climate change, the issue with competition with China, or the issue of how do we better prevent the next pandemic. And yet all of you came up with really thoughtful, original solutions that are not necessarily being talked about today. So you definitely hit it out of the park in terms of the originality and the creativity. But I was also impressed with your argumentation. If I were taking notes, I would have had trouble, writing down all the facts that were packed into your presentations. You did a really good job of backing your arguments up with, and even your problem definition up with some really compelling facts, which I found very, very convincing. So, Mike?
I found each of the 3 heat winners, the appeal of each of the 3 winners was different. And so in Beth Ann's case, I found it was very compelling that you tried to put some quantifiers around your assertions. As a guy who spent his life in the private sector, one of the things that I find perplexing about those in national policy of all kinds is that so often they wave their hands and paint with large brushstrokes, but don't leave us really understanding what the metrics are, what tells us when we succeeded, or what tells us what we're going after. In Abigail's case, I think the strategic compellingness, if that's a fair term, was overwhelming. This is an area that if there's an Achilles heel moving forward, this has to be one of the top 3. And so just very, very compelling in that regard. And then finally, in Jake's case, the timeliness of the proposal. We're all stunned and shattered by the events of the last 15 months. And this came across as a very appropriate and convincing way of stepping up to some of those challenges.
Well, thank you both for your feedback, and congratulations to the 3 heat winners. I think we're ready to move on to the crowning achievement of the day, which is the Best in Show. So Michelle, I'm going to hand it over to you to crown our Best in Show.
Okay, well, this is really where the drum roll comes in, and very, very tough choice. I mean, you all three of you are deserving of incredible acclaim for what you did today. But the Best in Show winner goes to Beth Ann Saunders. Congratulations, Beth Ann.
Thank you so much. I'm absolutely honored, and it was an incredible opportunity to have this opportunity, and also hear the incredible ideas from all the pitch finalists. I've learned so much today, and I'm so honored.
That's great. Well, we wish you luck.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, again, thank you not only to our heat winners and our Best in Show, but to all of our contestants, to all of our expert judges and our VIP judges. We really learned a lot today. I know I'll be thinking about the ideas that were presented. We also owe a big thank you to our supporter for this event, the Common Mission Project, and we're really appreciative of the opportunity to invest in the next generation of national security leaders. And then finally, thank you to our audience for your engagement and your support of the contestants. Shai, are there any closing comments, remarks, thoughts you have? Oop, you're on mute.
Again, I have to restrain the enthusiasm. That's why. First of all, huge congratulations to Beth and Saunders, but also to all of our heat winners and all of our contestants. Today was all about celebrating all of your ideas, and there were hundreds and hundreds of people watching. The chat was blowing up with ideas and questions and support. And really what the pitch has always been and will always be about is this celebration and this elevating of all of these next generation voices. And I've got to also extend a huge, huge thank you to Michelle and Mike, who have been champions of this event from the beginning. They're our original VIP judges, and it's so great to have you here. I hope we have you back again next year. And guess what? The CNAS annual conference, 2021 annual conference, is not over yet. As exciting and as peak a moment as this is, tomorrow the Make Room Mentoring Network is kicking off with a networking event at 12 noon. You can register for it on our website, or you maybe got an email announcing the mentoring network. Go check it out. And then on Thursday, we will be back with our grand finale of the conference starting at 11 a.m. Security in the Balance, Gaming the Next Defense Strategy. This will feature Stacy Pettyjohn, the director of our defense program, as well as the rest of the defense team, and Chris Doherty, and Becca Wasser, and Ed McGrady, and a host of other amazing, amazing experts, where we will be doing a live, unscripted strategy game that will need tons of audience participation. So we can't wait to see you back on Thursday at 11 a.m. With that, I will hand it back to my co-host, or to the host of today, who I have to tip my hat to and say, you did an amazing job working so hard up there. And thank you, Kate. And I'll pass it to you to close us out.
Yeah, so thank you again to everyone in our audience, all of our participants, all the behind the scenes folks, and we look forward to engaging with you further in the Make Room Initiative event tomorrow, and as the conversation continues through the end of our annual conference. Please do follow along the hashtag CNAS 2021 on Twitter, and please do stay engaged in building up the next generation of national security leaders. We look forward to seeing you next year.